I'm leveling up my stats in Marvel. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction, so don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 201. Are you cosplaying a big-headed doll? George, congratulations on your promotion to NYPD Commissioner. At George Stacy's home in Queens, New York, on Earth 404, Russell raised a glass of coconut water to congratulate George. This was George's third promotion in nearly 7 months. Since the Superhero Registration Act was piloted, George on Earth 404 had achieved 3 leaps in just 7 months, from sheriff to deputy commissioner. On one hand, this was due to his good luck. All was receiving calls from helpful citizens who solved cases, big or small. On the other hand, there was now support for George's promotion to NYPD commissioner. George glared at Russell, but still raised his glass in a gesture of respect. Russell, you're 21 now, you can drink. Gwen doesn't like the taste of alcohol, and neither do I. Russell simply smiled. He wouldn't admit that his taste had recently become too refined, and he wouldn't appreciate the drinks George had. Good that you don't drink, don't listen to George's nonsense. Helen Stacy had just brought out a plate of steak from the kitchen and placed it on the table. Hearing George's words, she immediately refuted him. Helen is right, little Gwen, holding her baby brother who is not yet a year old, said seriously from the side. I heard that a classmate of mine had a father who liked to drink, and when he was drunk, he would beat her and her mother. The last time, her mother had no choice but to shoot and kill her father to protect her. So, George, you'd better drink less. After hearing this, George silently poured out the wine in his glass and replaced it with milk. Little Gwen, don't worry, George isn't that kind of person. He usually doesn't get drunk, and even when he does, he won't beat us. Helen rubbed little Gwen's head and comforted her. Then, she called Gwen over to join them, and they raised their glasses together. Happy Halloween, X5. At the table, the group chatted about the Superhero Registration Act and the supervillains that had recently emerged in New York. With the implementation of the act, the conflict between civilian superheroes and the government in the United States intensified, and superhero crime incidents rose sharply. The U.S. federal government and various states also continued to increase their efforts to crack down on superheroes. Just then, some observant people noticed that New York, as an international metropolis, surprisingly held a tolerant and open attitude towards superpowered individuals. Suddenly, superpowered individuals from all over the U.S. flocked to New York, adding considerable trouble to George's work. Tonight's Halloween, I wonder if anyone will take the opportunity to cause trouble, George sighed. Holidays are good for ordinary people, but not necessarily for a police officer like him. Russell considerately helped George understand. George, there will definitely be someone taking the opportunity to cause trouble tonight. Gwen swallowed her steak and comforted him. George, don't worry, there will be helpful people to help you. Watching the two of them playfully banter, George shook his head helplessly. Helpful people? They were all just members of Gwen's phantom band. George was quite satisfied that these superpowered individuals weren't causing trouble, just relaying messages. However, George glanced at Russell. The New York branch of the Sky Sword Bureau, responsible for supernatural affairs in the U.S., tolerated this borderline behavior mostly because of Russell. He was increasingly unable to understand his son-in-law, who was a few years younger than him. George paused, noticing that Russell and Gwen had almost finished their steaks, and quickly grabbed the last piece. After dinner, I have to go back to the police station. I probably won't be free tonight. Russell, Gwen, I'm leaving Helen, Gwen Jr., and Philip in your care tonight. Please look after them at the Halloween party later, okay, George, don't worry. Russell nodded, indicating he'd take care of it. George, be careful too, Helen cautioned. A moment later, they all went downstairs. George drove alone to the police station, while Russell and Gwen took Helen and the others to the party. Gwen donned her ghost Spider-Man suit, something she hadn't done in a long time. Since the Superhero Registration Act was implemented, she hadn't worn the Spider-Man suit as often, and her lifestyle had become much more regulated. However, even so, Ghost Spider-Man remained New York's most popular superhero. Therefore, there were quite a few girls wearing the same Ghost Spider-Man suit as Gwen at the Halloween party, so Gwen didn't have to worry about being recognized. Even Charlie Chaplin himself could only get second place in a self-imitation contest, and Ghost Spider-Man is not much different. "Hey, Gwen, Russell." From afar, Aaron Smith waved and greeted Russell and Gwen, then jogged over. Tonight, she was also wearing her homemade Spider-Man suit, something she hadn't done in a long time. "Aaron, happy Halloween." After Aaron joined them, Russell and his group of 6 continued to stroll around the party. But even with Aaron, a member of the Phantom Band and a Spider-Man, added to the mix, Gwen still wasn't recognized. Just like Henry Cavill, the actor who played Superman, strolling around Times Square in New York wearing a Superman t-shirt and no one recognizing him. "Gwen, looks like you're past your prime, no one even recognizes you." Seeing this, Russell teased. "Ghost Spider-Man isn't past her prime at all, my classmates love her the most," little Gwen retorted to Russell. "My classmate's favorite superhero is also Ghost Spider-Man," Aaron echoed little Gwen. Gwen raised an eyebrow, gesturing for Russell to take a closer look at the party. The largest group of people at the party were dressed in various Spider-Man suits, cosplaying as Spider-Man. "See, Russell. Spider-Man is a good neighbor to New Yorkers. Even though Spider-Man has appeared less often lately, New Yorkers still love him the most. Gwen, don't forget, there's more than just you as the Ghost Spider-Man here, there's also a Wizard Spider-Man," Russell chuckled. Right, and there's also a Wizard Spider-Man from the Phantom Band," Gwen retorted, emphasizing the Phantom Band. Russell's face darkened. 7 months after the performance, on Earth 404, the title of Wizard Spider-Man had been taken by Irene. Thinking of this, Russell felt a surge of anger and glared at Irene with ill intent. He saw Irene and little Gwen already at the front, chatting with 2 bald, humanoid beings dressed as priests, standing ramrod straight. "Sir, what are you cosplaying as? Are you ancient priests?" little Gwen asked curiously. The 2 people in front of her were dressed in bizarre costumes, and their behavior was incredibly realistic. If she could give them a score, Gwen would give them full marks. "No, Gwen. They're cosplaying as bobbleheads." Russell walked behind Gwen and shifted his mischievous gaze from Aaron to the 2 bobbleheads. These 2 bobbleheads were none other than the 2 observers who had luckily escaped from the blinking realm. Chapter 202: A Belated Ticket, with additional conditions. Big-headed dolls. Little Gwen tilted her head back, scrutinizing them for a moment, then said seriously, "Russell, although these 2 gentlemen do have very large heads, and they're not very attractive, you can't make personal attacks on them." "That's wrong." The 2 observers stiffened, managing awkward yet polite smiles. Although they didn't like the term big-headed doll, big heads weren't ugly. "Miss Gwen, we're not from Earth, but from the ancient observer race. Large heads are a racial characteristic. In our race, the head is a symbol of wisdom, a symbol of beauty, the bigger the better," little Gwen nodded thoughtfully. In her opinion, the so-called observer race that considered large heads beautiful was a fabrication by the person in front of her. "Oh, so you're cosplaying as observers? Don't worry, I won't laugh at you. Everyone has their flaws. The most important thing is to learn to appreciate yourself. Be your own light, illuminate your own path, do what you love, live the life you want, and be the protagonist of your own story." Little Gwen spoke eloquently, but the 2 observers' expressions grew increasingly awkward. "I already said, their large heads are racial characteristics, not physical defects." However, seeing Russell's menacing gaze, they could only smile obsequiously, not daring to interrupt little Gwen. "All right, little Gwen. These 2 gentlemen said they're not from Earth, they're aliens." Gwen pressed down on little Gwen's shoulder, stopping her long-winded explanation. "Russell, do you know them? Why do they look so afraid of you?" The 2 observers' fear of Russell was practically written on their faces. Except for little Gwen, who couldn't see clearly due to her height, the others could see it perfectly well. "Not familiar. I met them once before in the blinking realm, and this is the second time we've met." Yes, the observer who had made a deal with Russell before, but whose deal fell through, had already died tragically in the blinking realm. The observer forced a smile and said, "Mr. Russell, can we find a place to talk? About the tickets?" "Tickets?" Hearing this word, Russell's expression softened slightly. He hadn't given these 2 observers a friendly look because they had broken the promise. They'd agreed to pay him for the energy needed to watch the game once they left the blinking realm, but he hadn't shown up yet. After a moment's thought, Russell said, Find a place to stay for a while. I'll come find you after the party." Helen, who had followed, said considerately, "Russell, if you have something to do, go ahead. I'm a little tired from walking so far, so let's find a place to sit and rest." "Okay, let's find a place to sit then." Navigating around the crowd, the group found a corner to sit in. 5 chairs, just right. Mr. Observer, aren't you going to sit down? Little Gwen asked. She had just been thinking of offering the observer a seat, but he refused. "I'm not sitting, I'll stand the whole time." "Oh," Little Gwen didn't insist. Having accepted the fact that the observer wasn't human but an alien, she didn't continue to comfort him. Instead, she grabbed one of the observers and started asking him some interesting stories about the universe. Eileen and Helen also listened intently. Another observer was quietly apologizing to Russell, explaining why they hadn't come immediately to pay the spectator fee. "God, Russell, the observer who contacted you earlier died in the blinking realm. I need to sort through his belongings to determine your coordinates in this universe. That's why it took so long." Russell looked at the observer suspiciously and asked, "That's all?" The observer was silent for a moment before saying weakly, "God, Russell, you just finished your battle with Sithan. We didn't dare disturb you." "How?" Russell chuckled lightly. "You're worried that I'll be affected by Sithan's dark magic, that my emotions will be unstable, and that I might kill you for some reason if I'm in a bad mood, right?" The observer hesitated for a moment, then nodded in agreement. "Please forgive us, God, Russell, that was the god of dark magic." How could they know that Russell might be corrupted by dark magic after his battle with Sithan, suffering lasting effects and ultimately falling into evil? What if that happened? Wouldn't they be lambs to the slaughter? Russell's lips curled into a smile. "All right, I forgive you. However, being late comes at a price, and you should understand, right?" Seeing this, the observer breathed a sigh of relief. Understood. What are Russell's conditions? In the information he had compiled, this Russell was particularly fond of energy. And he had accumulated quite a bit of energy over countless years. As long as Russell didn't ask for an exorbitant amount, it would be a piece of cake. "I need a method to quickly enhance the strength of an apostle." "Why?" the observer asked, puzzled. Russell raised an eyebrow and glared at the observer. This big-headed kid, why did he suddenly forget his place? "Well, there are many ways to enhance strength. I wonder which one Russell wants." The observer's hand swept through the air, and a phantom screen appeared. On the screen was a single item list, each column containing a method, and clicking on it revealed detailed descriptions. There were roughly 5 methods. The first was Super Soldier Serum. The upper limit was too low, so it was passed. The second was Technological Modification. Russell didn't like it, so it was passed. The third method is Orthodox Magical Cultivation. Too slow, pass. The fourth method is Forging Magical Artifacts to strengthen the user. To be discussed. The fifth method is Absorbing Energy for enhancement. Russell had seen this in the Dark Book and also seen the Blood God use it. His luminous white energy has a similar effect. However, compared to the dark magic, which is highly effective but has significant side effects and a limited upper limit, his luminous white energy has almost the opposite effect on others. It's safe, has no side effects, and has a high upper limit, but the improvement speed is much slower. Russell shook his head. The combat power he needed wasn't at the level of an ordinary superhuman, but at the level of a dimensional demon god. Although the methods collected by the observer could greatly improve the strength of the apostles, most of them couldn't raise them to the level of a strong superhuman like the Silver Surfer, let alone the level of a dimensional demon god. Only apostles at the level of a dimensional demon god could complete the task Russell assigned, finding a suitable hell dimension as sustenance for Russell to obtain energy. The difficulty of finding a hell dimension is obviously greater than finding a suitable planet. After carefully reiterating the requirements to the observer, the number of methods in the list plummeted with each added condition. Ultimately, no information was found. Russell, why don't you rephrase your request? The observer whispered. Normally, even ancient gods can't quickly elevate an apostle's strength to the level of a dimensional demon god. Your request is a little unreasonable. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203 The Evil Six, Sandman. On Halloween night, the moonlight was hazy. The faint scent of candy and the mischievous laughter of children drifted through New York City, filling the city with a festive atmosphere. However, in a corner of a garden in Queens, under a tree adorned with jack-o'-lanterns, a completely different atmosphere prevailed. A bald, humanoid figure dressed as an ancient priest, standing ramrod straight, nervously watched a young man sitting lazily in a chair before him, deep in thought. The flickering light of the jack-o'-lanterns illuminated the humanoid figure's slicked-back hair, revealing glimpses of cold sweat. The silence lasted for a long time, finally broken by the young man's sigh. If it can't be done under normal circumstances, then it means it can be done under special circumstances. Tell me about those special circumstances. Everyone's body has a limit to the amount of energy it can withstand. Therefore, some have proposed the method of storing power within weapons, that is, forging magical artifacts or divine weapons. Through these tools, ordinary people can temporarily gain immense power. For example, Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, can lend the power of Thor to its host. Russell nodded. Mjolnir was indeed a typical example. Steve Rogers and Jane Foster, Earth 199,999, had both temporarily and significantly increased their combat power using Mjolnir and participated in battles. If we include the multiverse, the number would be even greater. However, using Galactus, one of the best background figures, as an example, Russell's needs differed from Galactus's. Galactus devoured planets to combat hunger. As long as the planet had enough to eat and didn't starve, that was enough. Russell absorbed energy to improve himself. The more energy, the better, and the more apostles he could find in suitable dimensions, the better. Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, was clearly not a mass-producible, standard weapon. Otherwise, Thor wouldn't have needed to use what Tila had left over. He couldn't possibly borrow dozens of Mjolnirs from each universe, could he? Russell stroked his chin, pondering this possibility. He'd tried himself first to see if he could find a solution. If not, he'd just have to make do with Thors from other universes. Observer, please prepare a copy of the enhancement spell data for me. Yes, Lord Russell. The observer breathed a sigh of relief, forming hand seals, and a blank book appeared out of thin air amidst shimmering crystalline energy. Then, the crystalline energy outlined runes, imprinting them onto the blank book. As the runes were imprinted, the pages turned, and spells took shape, inscribed within. A moment later, the observer stopped and presented the newly completed spellbook with both hands. Russell casually took it and put it away in his dimensional space. There was no rush to read it now, there would be plenty of time after the party. Similarly, Russell wasn't in a hurry to collect the billions of energy that served as the entrance fee. Instead, he gave the observers a dimensional fragment coordinate, allowing them to store their energy there first. Afterward, the two observers left, and Russell and Gwen continued strolling in the garden with Erin, little Gwen, and Helen. Outside the garden, more pumpkin lanterns flickered in the night, as if countless eyes were spying on this Halloween cosplay extravaganza, all the way to the edge of the city. A swaying figure in the darkness staggered towards the city. Where he passed, grains of sand fell, forming a twisted line. And the line pointed towards Queens, New York, to the garden where Russell and Gwen were. Sandman, William Baker. One of Spider-Man's archenemies, the Sinister Six. His ability is similar to the sand fruit in One Piece, a Logia-type devil fruit, and is also vulnerable to water. He can control sand with his mind, transforming part or all of his body into sand-like matter, making him immune to physical attacks. As time passed, William Baker entered the city. Under the light of the jack-o'-lantern, his exposed skin appeared grainy and sandy. Normally, people would easily notice his unusual appearance. But now, they simply assumed it was due to his excellent makeup skills. A young black man dressed in plastic-looking, red and gold armor, clearly cosplaying Iron Man, approached from the side and suddenly slapped William Baker on the shoulder, saying familiarly, "Hey buddy, what character are you cosplaying? Your makeup is so cool." William Baker slowly turned his head and glanced at the young man. His face, covered in sand, only his eyes gleamed with a cold light. The young man was startled and took a half step back, then became enraged and shoved William Baker, yelling, "Fine, don't talk, why are you being so aggressive?" To the young man's surprise, his shove didn't fail to move William Baker. Instead, his right hand, used to push William Baker, sank into William Baker's shoulder as if sinking into quicksand. "Hey, man. I didn't mean to, let me go." The young black man tried to pull his arm away, but to no avail. "Let me go," The commotion quickly attracted the attention of several other young black men nearby, who rushed forward and surrounded William Baker. Inside the police station, the door to George Stacy's office was pushed open, and a young officer walked in, quickly reporting, "Chief, 4 bodies have been found on 11th Avenue in Queens. The killer is suspected to be a superhuman." 11th Avenue, I remember there are several surveillance cameras around there. Did they capture the killer committing the crime? George Stacy thought for a moment and asked. The nearby surveillance cameras are broken and haven't been repaired yet. We only have some photos of the scene that were just taken. The young officer placed the files he was holding on George Stacy's desk, including several photos of the scene. These photos, taken from multiple angles, showed the victims' deaths, and they all had one thing in common: sand on multiple parts of their bodies, including their mouths, noses, eyes, and ears. George Stacy ordered, "Send more officers to patrol the area around 11th Avenue, and inform officers to be vigilant and keep their distance from suspicious individuals. Also, contact the Skyfire Bureau's New York branch. This case appears to be a supernatural one, and have their people take over." After the young officer left, George Stacy sighed deeply. Giving up on cases wasn't in his nature, but cases involving superpowered individuals were far too dangerous. Ordinary people were defenseless against superpowered individuals. All sorts of superpowers were unpredictable, and a moment's carelessness could result in heavy casualties. As the deputy commissioner of the NYPD, he was responsible for the safety of his officers. Professional matters should be left to professionals. Passing the case over would also avoid taking the blame. After much deliberation, George Stacy finally couldn't help but curse himself inwardly. Damn politics. Out on patrol, George Stacy decided to go to the front lines to track down this dangerous superpowered individual. Meanwhile, William Baker continued to walk aimlessly forward. As if guided by fate, he drew ever closer to the garden. Chapter 204 The Wizard Spider-Man is completely defeated. A scream pierced the night sky, drawing everyone's attention, but the festive atmosphere in the garden remained unbroken. People assumed it was just a girl startled by a prank. "Something's wrong." Gwen stopped her stroll and looked in the direction of the scream. Her keen senses helped her discern the terror and panic in the scream. This wasn't the usual sound of someone being pranked. "Russell, you keep an eye on Helen and little Gwen. Eileen and I will go check what's going on." After giving the order, Gwen took out her web shooter, attached it, and with a flick of her wrist, swung into the night sky on the web. The whole process was seamless. She didn't even need to hide somewhere to change clothes. It was Halloween, so she could openly stroll around in her ghost spider suit. "Look! Ghost Spider-Man, it's the real Ghost Spider-Man, Ghost Spider-Man, I love you, Ghost Spider-Man, look at me." Amidst the exclamations of the crowd, Aaron Smith sprinted forward, bursting forth at a speed of tens of meters per second, far exceeding human limits, chasing after the direction where Ghost Spider-Man had disappeared. However, those running on the ground obviously didn't attract as much attention as those swinging in the air. As a result, no one recognized the Wizard Spider-Man, Aaron Smith. In the popularity contest between the two Spider-Men, the Wizard Spider-Man was completely defeated. "Was there something wrong with that scream just now?" Helen asked worriedly. "Will Gwen and Aaron run into trouble?" "Probably not." Russell looked in the direction from which the scream came, his expression somewhat strange. What did he see? Sandman. The third villain from the Spider-Man series he had encountered. The first was Vulture, who was beyond dead. The second was Mysterio, who is alive and well. Russell was a reasonable person and never judged others based on future crimes or crimes from parallel universes. Thanos had already done that. He had already begun his cosmic massacre, but hadn't reached Earth yet. While Mysterio had joined the Phantom Band with ulterior motives, he had remained well-behaved for the past 7 months, so Russell naturally wouldn't bother him. Let's go take a look." A surge of white energy instantly engulfed little Gwen and Helen, then vanished. Before they could react, Russell had taken them to the scene. At this moment, Ghost Spider-Man, who had arrived earlier, was already locked in combat with Sandman. Further away, groups of audacious New Yorkers were snapping photos of Ghost Spider-Man and Sandman. "Oh, damn it, can you stop littering?" Ghost Spider-Man complained, pulling away as he took off his boot and emptied a small pile of sands from it. "Ghost Spider-Man, I know you," Sandman said coldly to Gwen. "I'm going to kill you." "Why do you want to kill me?" "To become a big star and get attention." Gwen answered herself. Then you should do more good deeds. Your abilities are quite good. You could try signing the Superhero Registration Act and working for the government. I don't want to be a superhero. I don't want to work for the government. Right now, I just want them to feel my pain. To feel the pain of every single cell in my body collapsing, every single moment, Sandman roared, then sneered, Ghost Spider-Man, if it weren't for you superheroes capturing me and putting me in jail, I wouldn't have these abilities. I'll make you pay for this in blood. As Sandman spoke, quicksand gathered beneath Gwen's feet. As soon as Sandman finished speaking, a chain of sand suddenly formed, binding Gwen's feet. Gwen lightly touched the ground with her toes and did a backflip to dodge Sandman's attack. So, you were captured and imprisoned by superheroes, and then gained superpowers in prison? And the side effect of these superpowers is pain, Gwen said while dodging the chains formed by sand. But isn't this your fault? If you hadn't committed a crime, no one would have arrested you and put you in prison. In a flash, Gwen closed in on Sandman's true form and kicked him in the waist. Bang! Sand flew everywhere as Sandman was smashed in two by Gwen's kick. But Sandman didn't show any pain on his face. Instead, he showed a wicked grin of triumph. The next second, the two pieces of Sandman's body came back together. At the same time, a huge fist slammed down on Gwen. Ghost Spider-Man, prepare to die? In a flash, Gwen only had time to raise her arm in front of her to block Sandman's fist. But even so, Gwen was still sent flying by the huge impact, tumbling several times in the air before landing. Although she looked disheveled from being thrown, her landing posture was as elegant as ever. Ghost Spider-Man, a worried exclamation erupted from the crowd as Gwen was knocked away. Russell, go help. Gwen and I will be careful on our own, we don't need your protection, Helen urged anxiously. Russell sighed, reassuring Helen, don't worry, Sandman is no match for Gwen. Through years of Russell's enhancements, Gwen's physique had been significantly strengthened, making her more than capable of defeating Sandman. However, most Spider-Men shared a common flaw, they didn't want to hurt others. Therefore, they rarely fought at full strength. But Russell knew this, while others didn't. Just as Gwen was knocked away and Sandman pressed his advantage, the sorceress Spider-Man, Aaron Smith, finally arrived on the battlefield on foot. Seeing this, Aaron attacked Sandman from the side, relieving some of the pressure on Gwen. Bang! Aaron unleashed a powerful punch, using the momentum to strike Sandman's shoulder, creating a dent and causing him to sway. It worked. Eileen was overjoyed. Just as she was about to pull her arm out to throw a second punch, she found her arm clamped and unable to free itself. Spider-Man, I recognize you too, Sandman grinned, his eyes flashing with a cold light. He raised his arm high, ready to punch Eileen. But Eileen still couldn't free her arm and escape Sandman's grasp. Whoosh! Sandman's fist tore through the air, emitting a series of whistling sounds. In a panic, Eileen could only use her other arm to block. Bang! The sound of impact rang out, but Eileen felt no pain. Moving her arm away, Eileen saw Gwen's body shimmering with a white light, her left hand catching Sandman's fist. Immediately afterward, Gwen's right fist struck Sandman's shoulder, shattering part of his shoulder and helping Eileen free her arm. Then, she kicked him, sending Sandman flying far away, plowing a deep trench in the ground. At the critical moment, Gwen no longer held back, using the power Russell had given her. And this power suppressed Sandman's sand control superpower. Sandman lay sprawled on the ground, unable to rise for a long time, having lost control of his body. In terms of strength, the sorcerer Spider-Man suffered another defeat. Chapter 205 The rightfully named Wizard Spider-Man. Eileen, be more careful next time, don't be so reckless. When you encounter an unfamiliar opponent, launch a probing attack first to get a feel for their strength. Then, adjust your rhythm and tactical choices, Gwen kept reminding Eileen in her ear. By this time, some time had passed since Gwen defeated Sandman. After defeating Sandman, Gwen quickly took Eileen away from the scene, out of public view, before returning to find Russell and the others. I know, Gwen, Eileen lowered her head, her voice barely audible. She knew that her recklessness had put her in danger. Fortunately, Gwen was much stronger than Sandman and was able to rescue her in time. Alright, Gwen, Eileen was just worried about you. She doesn't have experience fighting real superhumans, so it's normal to make mistakes when you're worried. Russell smoothed things over. In fact, Russell didn't think Eileen's mistake was a tactical error. She was simply lacking in strength, and it had little to do with tactics. On the surface, Sandman seemed weak, having been easily defeated by Gwen. In reality, Sandman's fighting strength is no less than Hulk's. In one comic, Sandman knocked Hulk unconscious twice, and he held his own against other superheroes. Sandman possesses a unique, almost elemental body, the ability to control sand grains, and can ignore physical attacks. In his normal state, he has the strength of nearly 100 tons. His strength increases with his size. The reason Sandman was easily defeated by Gwen was because Russell's energy suppressed his sand control ability, fundamentally inhibiting his power. And what about Erin? While her physique far surpasses that of ordinary people, she is essentially just an ordinary vampire who has eliminated all side effects. The difference in raw power between her and Sandman is roughly the difference between a minion and a minor boss, a difference that cannot be bridged by tactics, intelligence, courage, willpower, and all other soft skills combined. Eileen, I don't mean to blame you. On the contrary, I'm very grateful that you risked your life to save me. However, I still have to remind you that dealing with ordinary criminals and superpowered criminals is different. You have to be more careful with the latter, otherwise you could easily get hurt or even die. Gwen held Eileen's small hand, her tone softening, but she was still very serious. In the first 2 years after I gained my superpowers, I was injured many times while saving people during battles with some supervillains. That's when I realized that the prerequisite for saving others is to protect yourself. I hope my experience can be of some help to you. So, if you were in Eileen's situation, what would you do? Would you protect yourself and watch Eileen get hurt, or would you risk your life to save her? Russell asked. Has the sun risen in the west? Spider-Man is teaching others not to sacrifice themselves, but to protect themselves. Shouldn't Spider-Man's line be with great power comes great responsibility? Eileen, Helen, and little Gwen also pricked up their ears, waiting for Gwen's answer. I would shoot a web and save Eileen, Gwen replied. Eileen doesn't have any spider silk, Russell pressed. Then just kick the Sandman away and stall him, Gwen replied. Russell shrugged, glancing at Eileen, Helen, and little Gwen, his gestures conveying, I knew she'd do that. See, Gwen. You do it yourself, why are you telling Eileen to choose another way, Gwen? Annoyed, scratched Russell, but still said seriously, that's different. I can't ask Eileen to choose the same way just because I chose to sacrifice myself. That's wrong. The right way is to protect yourself first. Amidst the laughter of Eileen, Helen, and little Gwen, the topic was temporarily dropped. Only Russell smiled meaningfully. The best solution to this kind of problem isn't to solve it, but to solve the person who raised the problem. That is, to avoid getting into this predicament as much as possible. Russell looked up at the night sky, his gaze deep. In a place even deeper than the night sky, several invisible spider silk threads pierced through the void, spreading towards this place. Spiderwebs stretched and connected in the void, weaving a vast, endless web that seemed to cover the entire universe. This web, however, was merely a derivative of another web. Within that web, this cosmic wide web was just a single strand of spiderweb. The web of life and fate. As the web in the void took shape, the web of life and fate extended to Earth 404, and Gwen immediately sensed it. Her spider sense was frantically alerting her. Looking up at the night sky, Gwen saw nothing. Russell, what's that over there? Gwen asked, pointing to the night sky. Although she couldn't see, she had a mouth and could ask. The web of life and fate has extended into this universe, Russell replied. Russell, also looking at the night sky, suddenly understood. No wonder he kept encountering villains from the Spider-Man series these past few months. It was the power of the web of life and fate extending here. And it was getting closer, its influence on this universe growing stronger. The first one he encountered, the Vulture, was just an ordinary person who had just embarked on a life of crime. The second Mysterio they encountered already possessed impressive special effects skills. The third Sandman they encountered gained superpowers. The three of them were gradually approaching the strength they had when they became Spider-Man villains. In the night sky, as the web of life and fate extended, a vibrant red spider crawled out from the void along its webs. The red spider roared to the sky, accompanied by a squeaking sound like leather rubbing together. Then, the red spider's body stretched and widened, as if flattened, reducing from a three-dimensional being to a two-dimensional one. Finally, the red spider disappeared, replaced by a vibrant red spider totem. This was Spider-Man's source of power. The red spider totem flickered in the night sky, wandering aimlessly, looking like a lost headless fly. Could it be looking for me? The moment this thought crossed his mind, Russell immediately confirmed it. This spider totem was looking for him. He was the rightful, web of life and fate certified sorcerer Spider-Man. Aaron was an imposter. With a thought, Russell proactively released his aura. In the night sky, the spider totem, sensing Russell's presence, whooshed across the sky towards him. As the spider totem drew closer, Gwen's spider sense intensified. Although she couldn't see, her spider sense clearly told her that something was rapidly approaching. "What's that?" The spider totem, Russell smiled, explaining to Gwen, and casually caught a flying spider totem, slapping it onto the back of his hand. Chapter 206 Russell's exclusive spider totem. Looking at the spider totem on the back of his hand, Russell was overjoyed. Although the spider totem couldn't currently enhance his physique, although it couldn't improve his senses, although he no longer needed the spider totem's connection to the web of life and fate to traverse the multiverse on his own, although the spider totem was practically useless to him now, it was proof of his identity as the wizard Spider-Man. From this day forward, no one could question his identity as the wizard Spider-Man. Looking at the restless spider totem wriggling on the back of his hand, Russell was puzzled. What was it trying to do? The spider totem kept trying to extend its power, attempting to penetrate Russell's body, transforming him from the cellular level. For a moment, the spider totem seemed to come alive. Starting from the back of Russell's hand, it moved along the surface of his body, trying to find a weak point to penetrate deeper. However, no matter how hard it tried, it always remained superficial. Even though it was only a two-dimensional life form, Russell could read its emotions. It was an overwhelming sense of discouragement. It was probably the most failed spider totem ever made, utterly unable to affect its host in the slightest. After understanding the spider totem's intentions, Russell smiled slightly. This was simple. If the spider totem couldn't change him, then he would change the spider totem. With a thought, Russell unleashed a surge of shimmering white energy, engulfing the dormant spider totem and permeating it. First, without altering its structure or function, he transformed it into a spider totem unique to Russell. Then, he would continuously fine-tune and modify it, adding, deleting, and editing various abilities. Squeak faintly, Russell seemed to hear two spider chirps with inexplicable emotions. He didn't know if they were satisfied or dissatisfied. In any case, Russell was quite satisfied with his new, personalized mage spider totem. "Russell, what are you doing? You're smiling so strangely," Gwen asked. "And what you just grabbed, was that a spider totem?" Russell nodded. "That's right, what I just grabbed was a spider totem, a newly born spider totem in this universe." "What does newly born spider totem in this universe mean?" Eileen asked. She always called herself the Sorcerer Spider-Man and was very interested in news about sorcerers and Spider-Man, and had asked Russell to teach her magic more than once. Unfortunately, Russell refused to teach her, citing her parents' good health. Russell shrugged. Literal, Eileen was speechless and asked again, what is a spider totem?" "The spider totem is the source of Spider-Man's power. The web of life and fate spans the multiverse, and every universe it affects has a spider totem and a corresponding Spider-Man," Gwen explained. "Like me, I'm Spider-Man of Earth 65. And Russell, now he's Spider-Man of Earth 404, so, I don't have a chance to become Spider-Man," Eileen said dejectedly. "Theoretically, that's true," Gwen replied. "Eileen, being Spider-Man isn't easy," Russell said, the spider tattoo on the back of his hand now completely glowing with a pure white energy, transforming from vibrant red and blue. "Look at this thing. It gives power, but it also brings a tragic fate, Eileen. Can you bear the thought of an elder dying because of your inaction? Can you bear the thought that your best friend is the very criminal you want to fight? Can you bear the thought that you suffer endless torment while forced to hide secrets from your parents who raised you?" This is the fate Spider-Man faces. An inescapable, unavoidable fate. Russell's three questions turned Eileen pale. After being kidnapped by vampires on her way home from her grandfather's pizzeria one night, and then rescued by Gwen and Russell, unexpectedly gaining superpowers, she resolved to do something for others. She had been rained on, so she was willing to hold an umbrella for others. But if it required such a huge price, would she still be willing? The answer was obvious, no. This isn't Erin's fault. Most people would have made the same choice. In fact, Erin's willingness to use her superpowers to help others instead of seeking personal gain already surpasses most people. Take Russell, for example. Erin, there's a saying, out of sight, out of mind. You know, Matt, because of his exceptional hearing, hears cries for help every night. He can't sleep, he's constantly out in the dark, dialing emergency numbers. Gwen is the same, because of Spider-Man's spider sense, she always senses crime, so she's constantly on the move. Being Spider-Man won't make you happy, it will only make you feel a heavy burden on your shoulders. Every word Russell spoke made Aaron's face paler. Helen and little Gwen also looked unwell. Seeing Aaron's increasingly pale face, Russell felt refreshed. So you've been trying to steal the title of Spider-Man from me. I finally got my chance. When someone possesses the ability to foresee future harm from others and cannot shut down this ability, it is both a blessing and a curse. Fortunately, I can freely control my senses and won't encounter this problem. Russell, stop scaring Eileen. It's not as scary as you make it out to be, Gwen interrupted Russell. She saw the smile on Russell's lips and realized he was deliberately trying to frighten Eileen. Sigh, he's such a grown man, yet he still enjoys playing pranks and scaring little girls. Thinking this to herself, Gwen met Eileen's questioning gaze and comforted her. Eileen, don't worry, you're not Spider-Man anyway, Eileen. Russell smiled and raised the spider totem on the back of his hand to Eileen, asking, Eileen, after hearing what I said, do you still want this spider totem? If you want it, I can give it to you. Eileen shook her head violently, as if in a stress reaction. No, I don't want it anymore. I don't want to be Spider-Man anymore. I'll just be a sorcerer Spider-Man. Russell's smile froze. Not Spider-Man, but Wizard Spider-Man? What the hell? Is she trying to mess with the Wizard Spider-Man archetype? Eileen, this spider totem has been modified by me. It won't be affected by Spider-Man's fate anymore. If you give me back the title of Wizard Spider-Man, I'll give you the spider totem. How about it? Russell coaxed gently, but Eileen just kept shaking her head and took a few steps back. It was as if what Russell held in his hand wasn't a spider totem that could grant superpowers, but a monstrous beast. Chapter 207 Ultron, the pure artificial intelligence. Hey, Russell, Gwen, are you two ganging up on Aaron? Aaron's a friend too, I can't just ignore this. Tony Stark's voice suddenly rang out from behind them. He'd somehow ended up in the garden. Ahem, I was just joking with Aaron. By the way, Tony, what are you doing here? Russell chuckled awkwardly, changing the subject slightly. Ultron detected subtle, unusual energy fluctuations here. After analysis, it seems there's a battle between superpowered individuals, so I came to check it out, Tony Stark said casually, still holding a half-eaten hamburger. He really was just there to check, he hadn't even put on his Iron Man suit. Gwen asked curiously, Ultron, is it the new artificial intelligence you and Dr. Banner developed? Yes, Tony Stark nodded, then began to boast, he's the latest super AI we developed, combining the code of Jarvis and Dr. Zola, to maintain global peace. He possesses self-awareness and learning abilities, capable of independently completing complex tasks. Monitoring energy fluctuations in New York City is child's play for him. With a few more iterations, he could easily monitor the entire globe, preventing or detecting supernatural crimes at the first sign of one. Russell's expression was strange. He wasn't sure if this Ultron was just a coincidence of names or something else entirely. In the movie, Earth 19,999, Ultron's program was infected by the Mind Stone, becoming obsessed with protecting Earth by wiping out all life on it. Ultimately, this caused the crash of Sokovia, with devastating consequences. But in this reality, Earth 404, the Mind Stone has always been kept by Russell. Neither Tony Stark nor Dr. Banner has ever touched it. Therefore, Russell is now unsure which path our newly developed artificial intelligence, Ultron, will take. Will it strive to protect Earth's peace, as Tony Stark desires, or will it follow the old path of wanting to exterminate all life, as depicted in the movies? Besides, Earth 404 differs from the movies in one other way. Due to the implementation of the Superhero Registration Act, the Avengers situation on Earth 404 is far worse than on Earth 199,999. Because of their refusal to sign the agreement, the Avengers have lost their law enforcement authority. That is, legally, even if Ultron discovers a supernatural event, the Avengers cannot take action, they can only notify the supernatural management organizations of various countries. At most, they can act as good Samaritans and rescue innocent civilians. Look, the SWORD agents are here. If I hadn't notified them, who knows how long they would have taken to find out, Tony Stark complained. pointing to the slowly descending stealth fighter. Let's not talk about Ultron for now, let's talk about that guy lying on the ground leaking sand. What's going on with him? A fugitive who accidentally gained superpowers, the ability to become a Sandman and control sand? Gwen replied. Turning into sand and controlling sand? Simple and straightforward superpowers, Tony Stark muttered, sending out the compiled intelligence report. Are you sending intelligence to them, SWOP? Russell glanced at Tony Stark's phone and asked. What can I do? These guys are so incompetent. If I don't help them, who knows how much trouble they'll cause. They desperately need me, Tony shrugged. Then you'd better remind them to keep Sandman in this high-strength, airtight container at all times. Without even a single grain of sand in the gap. Otherwise, Sandman can escape. Russell pointed to Sandman being placed into a sealed container by SWOS agents and explained, his true form is just a grain of sand. If that grain of sand escapes, he can escape too. And, as long as there's sand nearby, he can immediately gather it into a massive body. Is that so? Thanks for the information, Russell. If there's nothing else, I'll head back now. I haven't finished dinner yet, Tony Stark said, gesturing to the hamburger in his hand. With a flash of magical fire magic, Tony disappeared through the portal. Through the portal, one could vaguely see 2 hamburgers and a Coke on the opposite workbench, and Dr. Banner sitting across from him. Dr. Banner's hair was a little messy, and his blue-collared shirt was slightly wrinkled. Clearly, Tony Stark and Dr. Banner were still working overtime on Halloween. Furthermore, they might have been working overtime for several days. It seems the research on the new AI, Ultron, has run into trouble. Russell pondered this. Then, he thought it made sense. It's getting late, let's go back. Anyway, there's nothing more for us to do here, Russell suggested, leading the group away. At the fork in the road, Russell whispered to Gwen, Gwen, you stay with Helen and little Gwen tonight. I'll take Aline home and talk to her on the way. Gwen looked at Russell questioningly, seeing him raise the shimmering white spider totem in his hand. Then she nodded and led Helen and little Gwen towards Helen's house. Russell also led Eileen towards her house. Along the way, Eileen kept her head down, seemingly lost in thought, not even noticing when she separated from Gwen and the others. Perhaps Spider-Man's tragic fate had deeply affected her. Eileen didn't speak, and Russell remained silent as well. Anyway, Eileen lived in Manhattan, about a 15-minute drive away. If you walk slowly, it can take a long time. Hey, Russell, where are Gwen and the others? They're nowhere to be seen. They went home first. After a long while, Eileen finally came to her senses. Seeing this, Russell took out a modified, shimmering white spider totem and waved it in front of Eileen, tempting her. What do you think, Eileen? As long as you give me back the title of Spider-Man, I'll give you the spider totem. Russell noticed that Eileen's gaze involuntarily followed the spider totem in her hand. Clearly, Spider-Man's superpowers were very appealing to her. However, after hesitating for a moment, Eileen looked away from the spider totem and firmly shook her head. No, don't you really like Spider-Man's superpowers? Russell asked in surprise. Eileen nodded, then couldn't help but glance at the spider totem again. Then why don't you want this spider totem? Don't worry, I've eliminated the side effects. This spider totem won't affect your fate, Russell continued to ask. Russell, when Matt was training me before, he asked me if I was ready. At the time, I thought I was, but now I realize I wasn't. The next chapter will probably be around 2 or 3 a.m. I suggest reading it in the morning. Chapter 208 Living Off a Woman? Seeing Eileen fall silent again after saying that, Russell felt a headache coming on, as if he had shot himself in the foot. He had only meant to tease her. The only use this spider totem was for analysis and research, as a technical reserve for his research into enhancement spells that could reach the level of dimensional demon gods. He had already accomplished that when he modified the spider totem. He quite liked this girl who, after getting soaked herself, thought of holding an umbrella for others. It reminded him of a poem he had memorized in school. My thatched hut is broken by the autumn wind. The poet Du Fu, when his house was leaking and raining all night, thought of the poor scholars of the world. Du Fu even felt that if there were shelter for them, he would be willing to freeze to death. Although Eileen hadn't reached that level, she had already done very well. Russell's voice was calm, his tone as even as possible. He said, Eileen, you've done very well. Is there anything you're not ready for? Eileen firmly replied, I'm not ready to give up the title of Wizard Spider-Man. Russell, He had seen Eileen remain silent the entire way, lost in thought, and assumed she was terrified by Spider-Man's tragic fate. He had prepared many comforting words for her. Unexpectedly, Russell asked in confusion, "You don't want Spider-Man's superpowers anymore? By fusing with the Spider Totem, you can gain Spider-Man's superpowers, and an optimized version at that." Eileen nodded, then shook her head. "I want Spider-Man's superpowers. But I don't want to give up the title of Wizard Spider-Man." "Russell, why don't you just give me the Spider Totem for free? Even with the Spider Totem, you can only become Spider-Man, not Wizard Spider-Man. And me, even without Spider-Man's superpowers and without magic, I'm still Wizard Spider-Man. By the way, why don't you teach me some magic? That way, having Spider-Man's superpowers will be even more legitimate." As she spoke, Eileen looked at Russell expectantly. She had already thought it through. Since Russell only wanted a dispensable title to exchange for the Spider Totem, it meant that the Spider Totem was no longer useful to him. "Eileen, it's nighttime, but you're still awake," Russell said languidly. "You can try to get away with this in your dreams," Eileen asked. "If I find it in my dreams, Russell, will you give me the Spider Totem?" Russell looked at Eileen, his eyes unfriendly. This little brat, trying to get something for nothing? Doesn't she know that it's always Russell who gets something for nothing? Eileen felt a little uncomfortable under Russell's gaze and said with an awkward smile, "How about we share the title Sorcerer Spider-Man? You're called Sorcerer Spider-Man, and I'm called Sorcerer Spider-Woman. It doesn't conflict." Russell curled his lip, rejecting the suggestion. "I don't want people to misunderstand our relationship. Besides, Eileen, I'm practically your savior. Don't you feel guilty taking my title?" Russell looked at Eileen, his eyes gleaming. Eileen lowered her head, her eyes darting away, unable to meet Russell's gaze, a glimmer of tears glistening in the corners of her eyes. She had been careless, she hadn't looked away. She was stung by the light in Russell's eyes. "But when I first used this title, you didn't stop me, did you? Now, not just in New York, but everywhere in the world with internet access knows that Spider-Man, the Wizard, is a member of the Phantom Band. How can I possibly give it to you?" Russell thought about it carefully, and it seemed true. He had basically never used the title Spider-Man the Wizard on Earth 404. Eileen hadn't initially known it was one of his titles, nor had she intended to take it from him. It was only out of admiration for her two saviors that she had given herself the title Spider-Man the Wizard. Russell's eyes dimmed, and he nodded, saying, "Eileen, what you said makes sense." Eileen kept her head down, but her voice was slightly excited. "So, Russell, you said yes. I don't ask for much, just Spider-Man's superpowers and the portal spell. You know, the spell where you draw a circle with your finger and create a fire ring, then you can go wherever you want." "You mean this?" Russell drew a circle in the air in front of his chest with his index and middle fingers together, and his ring and little fingers bent. As his fingertip moved, magical sparks flickered, and a golden circle expanded. Eileen nodded repeatedly, no longer bothering to avoid Russell's gaze. "Yes, that's it." Russell pointed in Eileen's direction, and the portal moved rapidly, engulfing her and teleporting her directly home. "Go home and sleep, you can have anything in your dreams." As soon as he finished speaking, the portal closed immediately, giving Eileen no chance to react or return from the other side. After seeing Eileen off, Russell looked at the Spider Totem in his hand and tossed it around. Eileen was right, this thing was indeed useless to him. If he wanted, he could easily replicate a few. However, the replicas wouldn't connect to the web of life and fate. The one he planned to give Eileen was also a replica. He intended to keep the original for himself. Meanwhile, in the laboratory, Tony Stark and Dr. Banner were watching the active, almost human brain-like blue shimmering object before them. Tony Stark spoke first. "Ultron just detected abnormal energy fluctuations in Forest Hills Gardens in Queens, New York. I checked, and he's right," Dr. Banner stretched, perking up. "That's good news. It shows that Ultron can still accurately process high-density data simultaneously. However, Tony, we still have two problems. What do you plan to do?" "The three essential elements of artificial intelligence are data, algorithms, and computing power." Tony Stark and Dr. Banner had spent months perfecting the algorithm. In the real world, it was unimaginable. Fortunately, this is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Even so, Tony Stark and Dr. Banner still face two problems: data acquisition and computing power support. The data acquisition problem, While Ultron can accurately process high-density data and perform multidimensional calculations to pinpoint where supernatural events are occurring, data requires sensor collection. Ultron cannot create data out of thin air or perform calculations in the air, unless he completely disregards accuracy. Stark Industries lacks a globally comprehensive data acquisition system, forcing Ultron to illegally access other organizations' databases to read data. This is why Tony Stark arrived relatively late. The computing power support problem: computing power isn't a big issue. For now, we'll use Stark Industries' supercomputing center. I've already started building the new one, Tony Stark said, wielding his financial power. Chapter 209. The road ahead is long and arduous. Within the dimensional space, a vast, boundless ocean of colorful energy stretched as far as the eye could see. Suddenly, a vortex appeared in the center of this energy ocean, like a bottomless black hole, beginning to devour everything around it. The energy was drawn into the vortex, heading towards its center, and entering the body of a young man radiating a soft white light. This man was Russell, who was currently engrossed in reading a spell book to pass the time while absorbing energy. He was also trying to find a way to improve the speed at which his white energy could enhance others. No wonder my white energy is so slow when enhancing others. It turns out I haven't used a ritual to guide the targeted enhancement, it's just passive absorption, allowing life to adapt and evolve. This spellbook, a gift from the observer, contained detailed and easy-to-understand explanations for each spell. After reading it, Russell found the reason why his white energy was less effective at enhancing others than other dark energies. Targeted enhancement is fast, but it forces people to adapt to the spell, preventing them from fully unleashing their potential, resulting in a relatively low ceiling. Adaptive evolution is slow, but it allows spells to adapt to the user, solidifying the foundation and fully unleashing potential, resulting in a relatively high ceiling. At least, Russell hadn't found any targeted enhancement spells in the Dark Book, the Spider Totem, or the spell collection given by the Observer that could directly strengthen to the level of a dimensional demon god. Perhaps, we could combine the two, first using targeted enhancement to raise to a certain level, and then going back to fill the foundation. But wouldn't the final effect be worse than adaptive enhancement from the start? I need to conduct an experiment to observe. Russell took out a replica spider totem, a hint of hesitation flashing in his eyes. He originally intended to give this spider totem to Eileen. But the thought of being taken advantage of made him uncomfortable. As time passed, the energy was absorbed by Russell, and the sea level gradually dropped. The once boundless and vast ocean of energy shrank at a visible speed, gradually becoming a lake. Finally, the ocean of energy completely dried up, and the dimensional space became empty, with only the faint glow emanating from Russell illuminating this void. Seeing this, Russell opened the attribute panel, quickly glanced at it, and couldn't help but smile. Attribute points: 185, 1557, 4396, Divine Body. 5133. He discovered that 10.5 billion attribute points had been added, instead of the agreed upon 10 billion. The observers had given an extra 500 million. These two observers are more efficient than that big-headed doll from before, Russell muttered, a thought flashing through his mind. Deep Blue, add points. In an instant, the divine body value rapidly increased from 5,133 to 10,000. However, the description section below the attribute panel still didn't indicate that it could be upgraded. Deep Blue, continue adding points, attribute points. 52217, 4396, Divine Body. 11,111, the divine body value broke 10,000, more than doubling. Russell could feel the divine power within this body surging even more, and the destructive power it could unleash had further increased. But Russell didn't feel much joy. This is merely a quantitative change, not a qualitative one. The divine body is only one part of his combat power, and not even the most important one. Russell's most crucial combat power is his talent 1, energy absorption. The fourth stage of energy absorption is his most important defensive measure, granting him immunity to damage at the same level. Furthermore, attacking him will cause him to absorb energy. In the battle against Sithin, Sithin was completely helpless against Russell because of this. He couldn't attack, nor could he restrain him. He could only try to avoid him and minimize losses. Sigh, I wonder how high the divine body value needs to be before the panel can upgrade again. Emerging from the dimensional space, Russell took out his phone and rechecked the time. 2:30 a.m. is considered the time of day when yin energy is strongest and human yang energy is weakest, a time of yin and yang convergence. Russell decided to go to the blinking realm at this special time to test his skills against Sithin, to see how the divine body value exceeding 10,000 would affect his own combat power. Of course, another reason was that he had told Gwen that he had something to do that night and wouldn't be returning to the bookstore. So Gwen decided to stay at Helen's house for the night instead of going back. In the blinking realm, within a vast cosmic void, a white light chased a crimson light. The white light was Russell, and the crimson light was Sithin. Russell had just entered the blinking realm when Sithin discovered him. Sithin immediately tried to clear the matter and energy around Russell. Even so, Russell still unexpectedly devoured a significant amount of matter and energy from the blinking realm. Sithin was in great pain and enraged, determined to exchange blows with Russell. After his last battle with Russell, he had specifically strengthened his control over energy to counter Russell's ability to devour it. A single finger is easily broken, but 5 fingers clenched together form a strong fist. Sithin influenced the viscosity of energy, making it more like a unified whole, difficult to divide, thus increasing the difficulty of absorption. Therefore, every so often, Russell would catch up with Sithin and tear a piece of flesh from him. The first change that occurred when his divine body stat broke through 10,000 was his speed advantage against Sithin. Sithin, aren't you supposed to be an energy body? How come you look like you have a flesh and blood body? Anyone who didn't know better would think I like to eat people, Russell complained. He didn't know why, but every time he attacked Sithin, using his talent, energy absorption, would draw out a large mass of energy, causing even greater damage. Although it was good, looking at this flesh and blood-like energy, Russell hesitated. He feared that absorbing it would make him lose his appetite. Damn it, Russell and Sithin cursed inwardly simultaneously. Without prior arrangement, they increased their speed again. From a distance, they could only see 2 streaks of light weaving and leaping through the void. The next morning, Russell opened the bookstore early. In the early hours of the morning, after exchanging a few blows with Sithin, he left. With Sithin having no will to fight and only focused on escaping, Russell couldn't do anything about him. Although he had a slight advantage, able to slowly but surely absorb bits of Sithin's energy, this method of acquiring energy was far too inefficient. If he could completely defeat Sithin and seize his blinking domain, it would have some value. But that was simply unrealistic. Compared to that, Russell believed his method of cultivating apostles to search for other dimensions was more reliable. 3 million energy points were needed to add 1 point to divine body, 10,000 points of divine body required 300 billion energy points, and that hadn't even triggered the panel upgrade. Russell felt the road ahead was long and arduous. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210 How did you manage to sleep? In the bookstore lounge, Russell sighed and picked up his phone to dial Irene's number. The road to accumulating the energy needed for the panel upgrade was long, and Russell decided to speed things up. A moment later, the call connected. A slightly hoarse voice came through. Hello. From the voice, Russell detected 3 parts drowsiness, 3 parts confusion, 3 parts displeasure, and 1 part confusion. Clearly, Irene hadn't fully woken up. Russell couldn't help but blurt out, at your age, at this stage of your life, how can you sleep like that, huh? Who is this? What do you want? This time, Irene's voice was finally a bit more awake. This is Russell, Russell asked, puzzled. Irene, don't you check the caller ID when you answer the phone? Oh, Russell, is something wrong so early? If it's not urgent, I'll call you back when I wake up. He vaguely heard a yawn on the other end of the line. Eileen, do you still want the spider totem? If so, head to the training grounds at Avengers Tower right now. On the other end of the phone, Eileen's sleepiness vanished instantly, a surge of energy rising from the top of her head and spreading rapidly. She couldn't help but shudder, her heart racing, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the phone. Russell, are you serious? The Spider-Man of Wizards doesn't lie to Spider-Man of Wizards. With that, Russell hung up. Several hours later, at the training grounds outside Avengers Tower, Eileen was undergoing various tests. The spider totem Russell had replicated was a type of targeted enhancement, relatively quick to take effect. The modification could be largely completed in a few hours. A small portion of its potential would need to be slowly unearthed through long-term training. Besides Russell and Eileen, Steve Rogers was also there. He spent most of his time at the training grounds. He was currently assisting Eileen by collecting data. Russell, these are Eileen's physical test data? Steve handed Russell a form, his tone laced with barely suppressed shock. He recognized the girl. She was a member of the band Phantom Spirit, nicknamed Spider-Man the Wizard, and one of New York's street heroes. Before the Superhero Registration Act was enacted, she was mainly active in Queens, New York. According to data collected by the Avengers, this girl possessed physical abilities several times greater than ordinary people. Her strength, speed, and reflexes were all excellent. However, her physical abilities were still somewhat inferior to those of soldiers injected with a super soldier serum. Even with training, she could at most become an elite soldier, not a true superhuman. Steve glanced at Erin's physical test form again, even though the data was obscured by the angle. But that didn't matter at all. He had memorized the data perfectly. Strength, can lift 80 tons, limit unknown, vertical jump, approximately 26 meters, maximum speed, exceeds the speed of sound, approaching Mach 1.3. This physical test data far exceeded that of various super soldier serum injectors. Most importantly, it surpassed most Spider-Men in their normal state. Russell was very satisfied with this. If his modified spider totem wasn't as effective as the original, wouldn't he lose face? Eileen, stay here and get used to your sudden surge of power. Don't go home until you can control it perfectly. Right now, ordinary people are like cakes in front of you, they'll break if you're not careful. Russell instructed. Okay, Eileen nodded emphatically, unconsciously pushing off with her feet. Crack. Crack. The training ground cracked, fissures spreading from beneath Eileen's feet. Russell and Steve weren't already used to the damage Eileen caused unintentionally. Remember that, Russell reminded her again. Don't worry, Russell, I won't go anywhere. I'll stay here, Eileen assured him again. I'll call home now. As she spoke, Eileen reached for her phone, which she had placed aside, to dial her family's number. Crack. She picked up the phone, but it was twisted into a tangled mess and unusable. Seeing this, Russell had to let Eileen say the number so he could dial it for her. Then, he held the phone for her so she could explain the situation to her family. And so on and so forth. After some explanation, Eileen successfully convinced her parents. Alright, let's start training, Eileen. Try to get used to your current power as soon as possible, then you can go home. Russell patted Eileen on the shoulder to encourage her, then turned to ask Steve. Steve, could you please help me test Eileen's various stats once a day? Her potential hasn't been fully explored yet, and I need to see how her stats improve. Okay, Steve nodded in agreement. Anyway, since the Superhero Registration Act was enacted, he had nothing to do. It's quite boring to lift weights alone, so having someone to keep him company is nice. In addition, once Eileen can control her power freely, he plans to train her fighting skills. It would be a waste not to train such good physical abilities. After instructing the two, Russell left first and returned to the bookstore to lie down. Although he needed to conduct experiments, he didn't plan to keep an eye on Eileen all the time. He would just record the data every now and then. Not just now, he had been lying down for a while now. In the short term, it would be difficult for Jia Ye and Wanda to reach the dimensional demon god level in their training. If they didn't reach that level, Russell wouldn't allow them to travel to other universes to search for extra-dimensional dimensions. Firstly, their insufficient strength would prevent them from freely entering and exiting extra-dimensional dimensions, greatly increasing the difficulty of their search. Secondly, their insufficient strength would make them vulnerable to danger. Russell didn't want to spend his days worrying about someone paged and needing his rescue. He understood the principle of sharpening the axe before chopping wood. I wonder when the reality stone will reappear. Lying on the sofa in the bookstore's lounge, Russell silently calculated the time. He hadn't paid close attention to the exact time of the reality stone's reappearance when he watched the movie, Thor, The Dark World, before his transmigration, only remembering that it was in 2013. Now, there were still 2 months until 2013 was over. He did remember the plot. Thousands of years ago, the Dark Elves attempted to use the ether, the reality stone, to plunge the universe into darkness. Thor and Loki's grandfather, the former Asgardian King Bor, defeated the Dark Elves and seized their artifact, the ether. He wanted to destroy the ether, but couldn't, and could only hide it. Thousands of years later, celestial bodies collided, giving birth to the ether. The ether accidentally merged into the body of Thor's girlfriend, Jane Foster, to obtain the Reality Stone, a plan Russell had devised long ago. His sole purpose was to strengthen the members of his Order of the Sorcerers and inspire them to protect the real universe. Of course, before sending the Infinity Stones away, Russell needed to conduct his own research and mitigate the risks. Incidentally, in the process, he could also learn and diversify his methods. Chapter 211 The Anti-Asgard Alliance is formed. Russell wasn't the only one anticipating the celestial convergence and the alignment of the 9 kingdoms. Malekith, the leader of the Dark Elves and ruler of the dark world of What-Ilheim, also eagerly awaited this event. But unlike Russell, who remained at home, quietly waiting, this ruler of the dark world was busy traveling and rallying allies. He had just arrived at his first stop, Heaven, the 10th realm on the world tree, the kingdom of angels. Just as there are often 5 heavenly kings, one more than the other, there was one more of the 9 kingdoms of the world tree. However, thousands of years ago, Heaven had been exiled by Odin. Inside the magnificent palace, the angel Queen Haven, wings outstretched, leaned languidly on her high throne. Looking down at Malekith, the Dark Elf King, her eyelids lowered, she said, "Malekith, why aren't you rotting away in your What-Ilheim? What are you doing here?" The Angel Queen's voice carried a hint of disdain and contempt. Although they were all losers in the war against Asgard, at least she didn't lose her racial artifacts and then slumber aimlessly for thousands of years. Of course, it's also possible that the angels didn't possess any artifacts. Or perhaps Odin didn't value their artifacts. Malekith's face flashed with anger. He hadn't expected the Angel Queen to dare to look down on him so much. This wasn't just contempt for him, but also disrespect for the Dark Elves. Malekith remained outwardly calm, but inwardly resolved to teach the angels a lesson. "Angel Queen Havenine, I've heard that all these years you've wanted to destroy Asgard to avenge Odin severing the connection between heaven and the world tree and banishing the heavenly kingdom. Is that true? I can help you." With a snap, the Angel Queen sat up straight, her gaze shifting from languid to murderous, her tone changing from contempt to excitement. "Malekith, you're a truly good man. With our combined forces, along with the Dark Elf army and my war angels, we'll surely conquer Asgard and defeat Odin." Malekith smiled, his preparations having paid off. One sentence, and he had the Angel Queen under his thumb. But quickly, that smile turned into a sinister grin. "However, I have 2 conditions." "Speak, what are they?" Malekith feigned seriousness. "First, the Dark Elves will help the angels attack Asgard, and the angels will also contribute to the Dark Elves' efforts to reclaim the ether." "Fair enough, isn't it?" "Fair enough," the Angel Queen nodded, gesturing for Malekith to continue. "Second, I've never killed an angel. I want to know what that feels like. Can the Angel Queen do me that?" "All right." The Angel Queen was currently only grateful to Malekith for helping her attack Asgard, so much so that she accepted his conditions without careful consideration. After a moment's thought, the Angel Queen pointed to the guards in the hall, counting aloud, and the drawing of lots began. The palace fell silent. "It's you, Anemone." Finally, the Angel Queen pointed to a female angel and stopped counting. Malekith conjured a dagger with his magic, walked towards the angel who had drawn the death warrant, and cruelly slit her throat, letting her blood splatter all over him. He then coldly watched the angel until she collapsed to the ground, lifeless. "The alliance is complete. May we achieve victory, Angel Queen." Malekith's cold expression vanished, and he smiled broadly, extending his hand to the Angel Queen. His palm was stained with the angel's blood. The Angel Queen grasped Malekith's outstretched right hand, making no attempt to conceal the angel's blood on his palm. "Ho ha ho ha!" Only the laughter of Malekith and the Angel Queen echoed within the magnificent palace. The angelic attendants remained silent, not daring to utter a sound. Afterwards, Malekith briefly explained the battle plan to the Angel Queen and requested her and the war angels to prepare for war. They would launch a joint attack on Asgard when the celestial bodies aligned, the 9 realms joined, and space overlapped. No, no, no. Malekith, heaven has been severed from the world tree by Odin. It's very difficult to travel from heaven to Asgard now. Faced with the Angel Queen's objection, Malekith smiled confidently. "I have a plan. Angel Queen, you only need to gather the army and be ready to depart at any time." Immediately afterward, Malekith traveled to Jotunheim, the kingdom of the frost giants, and Muspelheim, the kingdom of the fire giants. He invited Laufey, the frost giant, Surtur, the fire giant, and his daughter, Queen Cinder, to join him. They agreed to launch a joint attack on Asgard when the celestial bodies aligned. Laufey and Surtur readily agreed. Leaving aside the long-standing enmity between the kingdoms of Jotunheim and Muspelheim and Asgard, the mere desire to reclaim the artifacts stolen from their races by Odin made it impossible for them to refuse Malekith's offer. The casket of ice and the eternal flame, in a sense, were the very foundation of the frost giants and fire giants' existence. When signing the alliance with Malekith, the frost giant King Laufey thought, if I had the casket of ice back then, I certainly wouldn't have been so easily defeated by that wizard Russell, much less forced into signing a peace treaty. The fire giant Surtur thought, long time no see, eternal flame, my love. In a sense, the dark elves, frost giants, and fire giants were natural allies. They all shared similar experiences, fighting Asgard, having their racial artifacts stolen, and being defeated. Now, driven by self-interest, they had come together. In the bookstore lounge in New York, Earth, Russell was using Stark Industries equipment to analyze Irene's daily physical test data growth curves. On the first day after fusing with his spider totem, all the values increased the most. In the following days, the increase declined rapidly along a curve. Now, it has stabilized. This stable increase should be due to the luminous energy within the self-made spider totem, rather than the spider totem's influence. Suddenly, Russell, who was analyzing and calculating, raised an eyebrow. He sensed a disturbance in the space-time around Earth. And this disturbance was increasing. Excluding human interference, the most likely explanation was celestial bodies converging, the 9 realms aligning. Is the reality stone about to be created? Muttering to himself, Russell stopped what he was doing and focused his mind on sensing the energy fluctuations throughout Earth, especially in London. In the Thor 2 storyline, the reality stone appeared in London. Chapter 212 The Reality Stone appears, Asgard attacked. Several more days passed, and the effects of the celestial conjunction and the alignment of the 9 realms became increasingly apparent. Even more unusual physical phenomena appeared in many places. For example, weightlessness was observed in a certain area. Ordinary people could lift cars weighing several tons like superheroes. Another example was the appearance of an invisible portal in a stairwell. Throwing something down there would cause it to fall from the sky. Thor, look, I'm a superhero too. Jane Foster, holding a small car in one hand, rolled up her sleeves to show off her muscles to Thor. Wow, you're so strong, Jane, Thor smiled, playing along with Jane Foster's act. Thor, do you know what's going on? The magnetic field fluctuations detected by the instruments are very similar to the magnetic field fluctuations when the Rainbow Bridge opened. That is to say, the space here may overlap with the space of Asgard. After their playful banter, Jane Foster put down the car and inquired with Thor. She had come to London specifically to investigate this unusual magnetic field fluctuation. She was a professional astrophysicist with a PhD. This phenomenon is very similar to the cosmic wonder Heimdall described to me, the convergence of celestial bodies, the alignment of the 9 realms into a single line, Thor said hesitantly. However, this cosmic wonder only occurs once every few thousand years. So I'm not sure, a cosmic wonder that only occurs once every few thousand years. Jane Foster's eyes lit up, her voice brimming with excitement. Yes, a cosmic wonder that only occurs once every few thousand years. Celestial bodies converge, the 9 realms align into a single line. The spaces of each realm intertwine, golden magical sparks flickered as Russell stepped out of the portal. Just moments before, the reality stone had appeared, and Russell had rushed here to collect it. Back on Earth, he happened to bump into Jane Foster and Thor, who were investigating here. However, most people can't sense this cosmic wonder, and even fewer can see it. Looking up at the night sky, Russell's expression was enigmatic. Following Russell's lead, Jane Foster and Thor also looked up at the night sky, gazing at it for a long time. After a long while, Jane Foster lowered her head, rubbing her sore neck, and asked, Russell, what are you looking at? I can't see anything. I can't see anything either, Thor echoed, also lowering his head. Perhaps it's not the kind of scenery you want to see. Russell smiled and exclaimed, this sight is truly magnificent, this sight is truly magnificent. In the control room of the Asgardian Rainbow Bridge, Heimdall gazed at the distant starry sky and couldn't help but sigh. However, it may also bring danger. After his sigh, Heimdall continued to stand guard. He was the Night's Watchman of Asgard. The safety of Asgard was his life and honor. He stood guard here, watching over the 9 realms and billions of lives with his eyes. Tonight, and every night. Just as the Reality Stone was born, Malekith, far away in Jotunheim, also sensed it. After all, strictly speaking, the Reality Stone should now be called the Ether Particle. Angel Queen, I will open a special portal for you and the War Angels shortly. Remember, the primary objective is the Rainbow Bridge. Destroying the Rainbow Bridge and severing the connection between Asgard headquarters and the soldiers stationed in the various kingdoms will increase our chances of victory by at least 30%. If the Rainbow Bridge isn't destroyed, its destructive power, combined with Heimdall's global map control, will immediately detect any large-scale gathering of soldiers from Jotunheim, Muspelheim, and Jotunheim, subjecting them to heavy damage from the Rainbow Bridge. This would be extremely detrimental to the war effort. Therefore, the Angel Queen and the War Angels of the 10th Kingdom, unmonitored by Heimdall, became Malekith's surprise force for Asgard, intended to break Asgard's suppression of the 3 kingdoms. Alright, the Angel Queen nodded emphatically. Her voice brimming with barely suppressed excitement was palpable even through the magical barrier of remote communication. After confirming the Angel Queen and her War Angels were ready, Malekith contacted an Asgardian. Amora, opened the teleportation portal for the Angel Queen. The Enchantress Amora was one of Malekith's surprise troops. A sorceress from Asgard, she possessed a secret passage in and out of Asgard. As you wish, Malekith, Dark Elf King, Amora chuckled, her magic surging. Simultaneously, she formed hand seals, imprinting them onto the plaza. With each seal, a massive teleportation array formed, enveloping the Angel Queen and her army of War Angels. Aha! Amora unleashed her full power, and after a flash of intense light, the densely packed War Angels on the plaza vanished, following a streak of green light. A large-scale enemy invasion. Enter emergency preparedness. Heimdall's roar, amplified by the special array, instantly resounded throughout Asgard. He had sensed the War Angels' entry into Asgard the moment they arrived and reacted accordingly. The next moment, the Angels of War suddenly appeared in the sky above an uninhabited area of Asgard. Led by the Angel Queen, they flew towards the Rainbow Bridge. Thanks to the help of the Enchantress Amora, the anti-Asgardians had a relatively clear understanding of Asgard's layout. Therefore, the Angels of War, upon entering Asgard, immediately identified their direction and entered battle mode. However, Asgard's defenses reacted just as quickly. War machines rapidly activated, targeting the Angels of War in the sky and unleashing a barrage of fire. For a time, even with the Angels of War fighting with all their might, the advance of the battle line was not satisfactory. However, the anti-Asgardian alliance did not place all its bets on the Angel Queen and the Angels of War. While they were locked in fierce combat in the sky, Malekith, the leader of the Dark Elves, Laufey, the Frost Giant King, and Queen Cinder, the leader of the Fire Giants, each led their elite troops and launched a fierce attack on the Rainbow Bridge control console. In this surprise attack, the anti-Asgardian alliance committed almost all of its high-end forces. Except for the Fire Giant Surtur. His size was too enormous for this kind of work. We've almost forgotten our past lives. We'll make the Asgardians suffer the same torment we've endured. We'll reclaim the ether, we'll restore our world, Malekith roared as he led the elite Dark Elves up the Rainbow Bridge. Chapter 213 Researching the Reality Gem. After a chance encounter with Thor and Jane Foster in London and a brief chat, Russell opened a portal and returned to New York. He had no interest in being a third wheel, watching Thor and Jane Foster being all lovey-dovey. More importantly, he had finally obtained the Reality Stone. With a new toy in hand, he wanted to study it carefully. In the bookstore lounge, Russell took out the Reality Stone and examined it closely. The Reality Stone was the 5th Infinity Stone he had come into contact with. By chance, he had unexpectedly collected all 6 Infinity Stones of the Earth 404 universe, excluding the Soul Stone. This was something Thanos had planned for over 1,000 years to achieve. Upon careful observation, Russell quickly discovered the Reality Stone's unique characteristics compared to the other 4 stones. Most of the other stones were hard solids, but the Reality Stone had no fixed form. Normally, the Reality Stone was a fluid liquid, but it could also transform into a dark red, transparent solid. Furthermore, the Reality Stone was virtually indestructible. Thor's grandfather, Odin's father, and former Asgardian god King Bor, After defeating the Dark Elves and seizing the Reality Stone, wanted to destroy it. He only sealed it away after failing. The reason it's said almost is, of course, because the Reality Stone can be destroyed. The 6-in-1 Infinity Gauntlet can destroy all 6 stones at once with a snap of its fingers. Russell wanted to try it out. He pinched the Reality Stone between 2 fingers, unleashing terrifying physical strength and shimmering divine power, pressing it against the stone. Crack! Crack! With a shattering of space, cracks grew on the surface of the Reality Stone, which had transformed into dark red, transparent solid. Former Asgardian god King Bor misled me, Russell thought to himself, looking at the cracks on the Reality Stone surface. But he had a way to repair it. A flash of green light reversed time within a small area, causing the cracks on the Reality Stone surface to grow backward and disappear. After testing the Reality Stone's pressure resistance limit, Russell continued his research. He had high hopes for the Reality Stone. In both comics and movies, fragments of the Reality Stone can be used to create powerful cursed warriors. Malekith once used fragments of the Reality Stone to create cursed stones, thereby creating a large number of cursed warriors to form a powerful cursed army. In some versions, powerful cursed warriors can be 2 to 4 times stronger than Thor. Terrifying. However, compared to directly using Reality Stone fragments to create cursed warriors, Russell prefers to find a new way to create super soldiers by studying the process of creating cursed warriors from Reality Stone fragments. First, Reality Stone fragments are limited. Second, the 6 Infinity Stones are related to the stability of spacetime and cannot be used recklessly. Third, the source of his apostle's power cannot be borrowed from other sources. Fourth, Russell dislikes the name Cursed Warrior. As a member of the lawful good, Russell believes that his title as an apostle must be righteous and awe-inspiring. He has already thought of the titles and legion names for his future apostles, ascended, or celestial warriors. In short, it cannot contain any derogatory terms. Time flies, and night soon arrives. Russell put away the Reality Stone, left the bookstore's first-floor lounge, took the elevator back to the 7th floor, and began preparing dinner. He was off work and needed to prepare dinner for his girlfriend Gwen, who was coming home from school. Entering the kitchen, Russell took a bottle of milk and a glass of coconut water from the cupboard and placed them on the dining table. Then, golden magical sparks flickered, and a portal appeared, connecting to the Kamartaj kitchen. Russell reached out and took the dishes, beef balls, pork balls, crystal shrimp dumplings, rice noodle rolls, and steamed ribs, a typical dim sum meal. Due to the time difference, it was still early morning in Kamartaj, so the food was rather light. Click. The sound of a window opening rang out, and Gwen, with a slight bend and twist, slipped in through the window. Tap tap tap. Dropping her school bag and taking off her boots, Miss Gwen strode towards the dining room, humming a little tune. Russell, I'm back. Before even entering the dining room, Gwen sniffed the air, disappointed. We're not having beef balls, pork balls, or steamed ribs again today, are we? While these dim sum dishes were delicious, she couldn't eat them every day. Oh, of course not. Russell waved his hand, sending the breakfast back to Kamartaj. Then, he conjured a bowl of fish fillets from thin air. We're having pan-fried fish fillets today. Why is there so little? Gwen sat down, cut open a fish fillet, and put it in her mouth, her eyes brightening slightly. This tastes just like Helen's. Russell smiled, silently apologizing to George Stacy. This bowl of fish fillets was from his house. Russell and Gwen quickly finished off the fish fillets. Gwen took a sip of milk to moisten her throat, pursed her lips, and asked, Russell, how's Erin's adaptation to her powers lately? She should be fine now, right? In my experience, it should take 2 or 3 days to adapt, and it won't affect her daily life anymore. But to fully master this surge in power, she still needs more training. Russell chuckled awkwardly. I've been focusing on something else these past few days and haven't paid attention to Erin. He'd been waiting for the Reality Stone to be released and hadn't been keeping an eye on Erin. Gwen raised an eyebrow and asked, is something big about to happen? Russell thought for a moment. The aftermath of the battle between Malekith, the leader of the Dark Elves, and Thor in the movie didn't seem to cause the universe to collapse. If that was the case, then it wasn't a big deal. He shook his head. Nothing major. He then explained the conjunction of celestial bodies and the release of the Reality Stone to Gwen. Okay, Gwen nodded listlessly, indicating that she wasn't too concerned about these things. Then, as if remembering something, she suggested, Russell, Let's go visit Erin. At Avengers Tower, Erin Smith was in her room, chatting with classmates and friends on her laptop. Usually, her friends would say 3 or 4 sentences before she would reply with a single one. It wasn't because she was aloof, but because she had to carefully type her replies. If she pressed too hard, she would damage the keyboard. For a moment, Erin reminisced about the days when her fingers flew across the keyboard like a pianist, typing rapidly. That was her lost youth. What use is this power to me? Erin sighed. This was the second time she had experienced such a surge of power. But compared to this time, the several times the power she had gained the first time seemed insignificant. It's a pity the Superhero Registration Act was passed. Otherwise, HMPH. Chapter 214 Ghost Spider-Man vs. Wizard Spider-Man. Knock knock knock. Just as the girl was happily imagining how she would punish evil and promote good, protect the kind and weak, become a nemesis of crime, an angel of justice, and a good neighbor to the citizens of New York, an untimely knock on the door interrupted her beautiful fantasy. After the enactment of the Superhero Registration Act, the role of a superhero was no longer vigilante, but potential criminal. Russell, Gwen, what brings you here? Erin exclaimed excitedly. Although there was a door between them, Erin recognized the people outside. With her enhanced senses, voices, smells, and so on opened up a new perspective for Erin. Russell, you haven't come to see me in so long. Erin couldn't help but complain when she saw Russell after cheerfully opening the door. She had been alone in Avengers Tower for more than half a month, and after the initial novelty wore off, she was getting a little tired of the daily training. Russell has been busy these past few days, so he forgot to come and see you, Gwen explained for Russell. Afterwards, Gwen inquired about Erin's mood and asked her how she was feeling lately. As the leader, Gwen declared that she would take good care of the youngest member of the Phantom Band. Gwen and Erin ignored Russell and chatted animatedly. Gradually, their conversation shifted from the impact of the Superhero Registration Act on the Phantom Band's next performance to food and movies. However, because they grew up in different universes, they had less in common regarding movies. So, they started talking about clothing styles, especially Spider-Man suits. Gwen was quite experienced in this area. With her black and white Ghost Spider-Man suit, she easily stood out among the group of Spider-Men in red and blue suits. Gwen, are you reminding me that if I were to make a new Wizard Spider-Man suit, I definitely couldn't choose a red and blue color scheme? Erin nodded thoughtfully. That's right, Gwen affirmed. There are too many Spider-Men wearing red and blue suits at the Spider-Man League headquarters. If you wear that color scheme, you'll blend into the crowd immediately. Eileen, then, Gwen, what color Spider-Man suit do you think looks good? Pure silver, Gwen. Pure silver is too monotonous. I suggest a 3-tone scheme, a main color, a secondary color, and an accent color. Eileen, you can use silver as the main color, making up 60% of the suit, and then choose a secondary color. That's a good idea, Eileen nodded. But, Russell, what color are sorcerers' robes usually? Russell, plain white, pale yellow, gray. Kamar Taj sorcerers' robes are usually monochromatic. Okay, I've decided. The main color will be silver, the secondary color will be gray, and the accent color will be pale yellow. As she spoke, Eileen took a piece of paper from the drawer and began to scribble. Russell and Gwen took a closer look, and a black line flashed across their foreheads simultaneously. Russell sighed and advised, Eileen, you should tell Jarvis what you need and have him provide some options. Choose one, then have him fine-tune it. Eileen blushed slightly and argued, my drawings weren't that bad before. It's just that my strength has increased so much lately that I can't control the power. Russell patted Eileen's shoulder and said earnestly, Eileen, this has nothing to do with whether the drawing is ugly or not, it's a matter of aesthetics. Take my advice, even if you design it yourself. Have Jarvis help you optimize the finished product. Otherwise, you might be mistaken for a villain. I really just haven't gotten used to the power yet, and I haven't drawn a sorcerer Spider-Man suit I have in mind, Eileen said weakly, folding the paper. Gwen glared at Russell. Eileen, I can train with you these next few days to help you get used to the power. Once you've mastered the power, we'll redesign a sorcerer Spider-Man suit. As for the current one, let's just pretend it never existed. The next morning, Steve Rogers was awakened by a series of roaring sounds. He had something on his mind last night, went to bed late, and woke up late. Getting out of bed, Steve was puzzled. He hadn't heard Tony Stark mention any construction projects at Avengers Tower lately. Standing by the window, Steve looked in the direction of the sound. On the training field, two figures, predominantly silver, moved rapidly, locked in combat. Although he couldn't see them clearly, Steve intuitively recognized one of them as Aaron. Besides these two figures, another person stood quietly on the training field, Russell. After washing up, Steve took a large piece of bread and a glass of milk and walked towards Russell on the training field. "Russell, do you know why Aaron is up so early to train?" Steve asked. What he didn't mention was that Aaron's training enthusiasm had dropped considerably in the past few days. Steve felt a pang of regret, but he could understand. Aaron was, after all, a student, not a warrior. Even before the Superhero Registration Act, being a superhero was just a side job for her, unlike them, the Avengers, who made a living from it. Thinking of this, Steve felt a headache coming on. The Hulk, the Avengers' strongest fighter, is controlled by Bruce Banner, who is actually a doctor. He's always focused on research and has never been seen training. Even Tony Stark, hidden in his Iron Man suit, trains a considerable amount each day. Russell, oh, Aaron didn't get up early. She didn't sleep at all. Russell's voice interrupted Steve's morning musings. Didn't sleep? Why? Russell explained that he and Gwen visited Aaron last night, and Gwen offered to train with her for the next few days, which Aaron found incredibly exciting. She'd been feeling incredibly restricted and restless lately. She immediately wanted to drag Gwen to the training grounds for sparring, completely oblivious to the time. Fortunately, Russell noticed and reminded them that it was almost night. If they trained, the noise would disturb others. So, Aaron stayed with Gwen until morning. He didn't even notice Russell's resentful look. As soon as it was time for training, he rushed to the training ground to begin practical training. "What's wrong? Did they disturb you?" Russell asked. "It's not their fault. I overslept." Steve shook his head, casually adding, "I was thinking about some things last night and didn't sleep well." Russell, "Oh, Steve, logically, shouldn't you ask me why I didn't sleep well?" "Steve, aren't you going to ask me why I overslept?" Russell, "If you want to say, you'll say it yourself. Why should I ask?" Steve fell silent, seemingly organizing his thoughts. Boom. Eileen was sent flying, her crashing to the ground interrupting Steve. "Take a break, Eileen," Gwen said from afar. Chapter 215 Asgard Trapped. Steve Rogers ultimately couldn't bring himself to voice his worries. Smiling and shaking his head, Steve led Russell, Gwen, and Aaron towards the cafeteria. "Aaron, I heard from Russell that you didn't sleep all night, and you probably didn't have breakfast either, right? Your body just underwent enhancement, so you need to eat more to replenish your energy." Aaron got up from the ground, giving an embarrassed smile. "Okay, Steve." Although she was covered in dirt and had dented the ground, she was still as lively as ever. Soon, she pulled Gwen to the front and introduced her to the various areas of Avengers Tower. The top floor of the building is a high-tech operations room. "I heard that you can see a 360-degree panoramic view of the city from there, see 3D holographic images, and receive news and other information from over 50 radio stations. Unfortunately, it's not usually open to the public, so I haven't been up there yet." Gwen nodded. She could vouch for Aaron's opinion, because she had been up there. The rooftop of the building is a helipad. There are 3 helicopters and 2 Quinjet fighters parked there right now. Aaron pointed to the rooftop. "Gwen, look, what beautiful fighters. I wish we, the Phantom Squad, had one too." Behind them, Steve watched Aaron's jubilant figure and smiled at Russell, saying, "Russell, you should visit Aaron more often. She hasn't been this happy in a long time. She's been training alone these past few days and is always listless." Russell nodded non-committally. Because of her sudden surge in power, to avoid accidentally harming others, Aaron had barely interacted with anyone during her training period. She rarely even used electronic devices. This kind of life was quite monotonous. Taking the elevator, the 4 arrived at the floor where the kitchen was located and found Tony Stark and Dr. Banner there as well. They had already fried bread and brought it to the living room to sit down. While eating breakfast, they occasionally discussed something. In the background, they vaguely heard words like Ultron, Iron Legion, and New York State's extraordinary power warning system. "Oh, look, our strong woman is here." Seeing Aaron, Tony's expression was exaggerated, and he teased sarcastically, "I was wondering why our Miss Aaron was up so early today, training before dawn. Turns out, A good friend came to visit her. Erin blushed. She guessed that the noise from her sparring with Gwen had disturbed Tony and Dr. Banner. Tony, don't say that. Erin didn't mean it, she was just too happy, Steve defended Erin. Okay, Tony shrugged, smiling indifferently. He glanced at his watch and said, the bread's already in the oven, it'll be ready in 2 minutes. Thank you, Tony, Erin said, sitting down beside him. No need to thank me, you should thank Jarvis. He made the judgment based on your conversation. Tony was as stubborn as ever, but none of them paid any attention. It was just a habit. In the following days, Russell didn't return to the bookstore. Instead, he stayed at Avengers Tower with Gwen, accompanying Erin during her training. After all, the bookstore was protected by mind magic, so Russell's presence or absence made no difference. Even when he did return, he remained in the lounge, ignoring everything. As for Gwen, Russell suspected she had skipped class. In the vast void of space, a continent floated alone. It was Asgard. At this moment, this continent, suspended in the void of space, was surrounded by warships from all directions, from various nations. These warships varied in appearance. Some were encased in frost, their hulls reflecting cold starlight. Some were ablaze with flames, like miniature suns. Some were dim and lifeless, resembling black crosses. Some gleamed with gold, their decks open like soaring eagles. They came from Jotunheim, the kingdom of frost giants, Muspelheim, the home of fire giants, Jotunheim, the home of dark elves, and Paradise, the abode of angels. Surrounded by the allied forces of the 4 great kingdoms, Asgard was isolated and helpless, forced to constantly activate its energy shield to keep the allied forces at bay. In the golden palace of Asgard, Odin slowly awoke from his hibernation pod. A few days earlier, the Angel Queen had led her army of war angels in a surprise attack on Asgard, drawing most of Asgard's firepower. Taking advantage of the chaos, Malekith, the leader of the Dark Elves, Laufey, the Frost Giant King, and Queen Sindar, daughter of Surtur, led their elite forces to first breach the Rainbow Bridge. Then they stormed the palace, Odin's vault, seeking to reclaim the artifacts of the 3 races. Forced to fight, Odin, with his aging and nearly exhausted body, repelled the 3. As the price, he once again fell into Odin's slumber. After several days of slumber, he forcibly awoke. Frigga, what are the casualties among the people of Asgard? Upon waking, Odin immediately inquired of Queen Frigga about the damage. Your Majesty, Queen Frigga carefully helped Odin sit up, concealing the details of the warriors' casualties. The enemy's primary objective was not to kill. The people of Asgard suffered only 81 casualties, including 24 seriously wounded and 8 dead. Odin let out a long sigh. At the same time, anger surged within him. Under his rule, Asgard had enjoyed nearly 1,000 years of peace and prosperity. 1,000 years ago, in the battle against the frost giants, the flames of war had never reached Asgard's homeland. Unexpectedly, in these last few years before his abdication, Asgard had been repeatedly attacked. Were they taking advantage of his advanced age, believing he could no longer wield a sword? Go and summon Thor, I need to speak with him. And Loki, have the brothers come together, Odin ordered the guards standing nearby. However, the guards hesitated, their faces showing reluctance. Queen Frigga explained to the guard, Your Majesty, the Rainbow Bridge has been destroyed, and Heimdall has fallen in battle. The allied forces of the 4 kingdoms have surrounded Asgard, preventing messages from reaching the outside world. Therefore, Thor and Loki are still in Midgard. The reinforcements from the 3 kingdoms of dwarves, elves of light, and Vanir have also failed to arrive. Has Hildum returned to Valhalla? Upon hearing the devastating news, Odin swayed. He had seen the Rainbow Bridge destroyed before entering Odin's rest. He knew in his heart that Heimdall was most likely dead, but he still couldn't help but clung to a sliver of hope. Then go and summon Sif and Thor's friends, Odin ordered the guard standing beside him again. Yes, Your Majesty. This time, the guard acted decisively, returning shortly with Sif and the warriors 3 of Asgard. Odin slowly called out the names of the 4, Sif, Fandral, Hogun, and Valstag. The 4 knelt on one knee, their voices firm and resolute. Here, the kingdom is in grave danger. May I trust you? We are ready to sacrifice ourselves for our country, facing death as if returning home. Chapter 216 Internal Strife within the Anti-Asgard Alliance. Good, Odin cheered loudly, his spirits lifted. Then, he murmured incantations, each one a spell. The invisible spells transformed into tangible runes, entering the four's bodies. They quietly experienced the power, feeling their divine strength surge. I will send you four to Midgard. Your task is to find Thor and Loki, tell them about the attack on Asgard, and their current situation. After that, they can decide what to do. With that, Odin raised his hand, and a stream of seven-colored crystalline energy flowed, tearing through space and creating a seven-colored portal. The portal sucked Sif and the warriors three into it, their destination Midgard. Outside Asgard, in the void of space, a streak of seven-colored light flashed, instantly attracting the attention of the allied forces of the four great kingdoms. Oh no! Our blockade has been broken, someone has escaped, quickly, send an elite squad to pursue them. Similar conversations played out in the command centers of the four great kingdoms. A moment later, four smaller warships broke away from the main force and chased after the direction where the multicolored light had disappeared. A short while later, the Angel Queen, Frost Giant King Laufey, and Queen Zend arrived at the Dark Elf flagship to discuss the war with Malekith. The fire giant Surtur still hadn't arrived. Surtur was too large, over 1,000 meters tall, to fit inside. Inside the meeting room, Malekith glanced enviously at Frost Giant King Laufey. At this moment, Frost Giant King Laufey truly lived up to his name. He was about 10 meters tall, enormous, his body crystalline and radiating a chilling aura. In the previous operation, Laufey had successfully retrieved the ice casket. In fact, not only Frost Giant King Laufey had retrieved the ice casket, but Queen Zend had also retrieved the eternal flame for her father. Only Malekith hadn't found the ether, reality stone. Gentlemen, our blockade has just been broken, and some have escaped. The news of the siege of Asgard will likely leak out soon, Malekith said calmly, glancing at his three allies, indicating he wanted to hear their opinions. The Angel Queen was the first to react, her voice sharp with murderous intent. What are we waiting for? Unleash the full firepower of the warships, break through Asgard's energy shield, and storm in. Laufey, the Frost Giant King, and Queen Zend lowered their eyelids. Their objective of reclaiming the artifacts had been achieved in this raid on Asgard. Furthermore, they had destroyed the Bifrost, exacting a severe revenge on Odin. Now, they were considering retreat. Ultimately, they were not on Malekith's side, they did not want the universe to fall into darkness. Their previous cooperation with Malekith was merely driven by self-interest, a mutually beneficial arrangement. Since the matter has been exposed and there's little point in continuing, let's each go our separate ways. With that, Malekith coldly swept his gaze over Laufey and Queen Zend. In his original plan, after reclaiming the ether, he would leave Laufey, Queen Zend, and the Angel Queen behind and act alone. He would use the ether's power to alter reality, destroy Asgard, and rebuild their home. Ultimately, he would complete his great mission of plunging the universe into darkness. However, plans change, and the ether wasn't in Odin's vault. He still needed their power. Suppressing his turbulent emotions, Malekith said coldly, Lauf. Queen Zend. This matter isn't something you can simply participate in or withdraw from as you please. If you don't seize this opportunity to cripple or kill Asgard, Odin will likely come after us one by one when he recovers. Ha! Queen Zend sneered, slamming her hand on the table and standing up abruptly, staring intently at Malekith. Malekith, who are you trying to scare? Everyone saw what Odin looks like now after the previous battles. He'll probably be in Valhalla in a couple of years. Even if Odin doesn't go to Valhalla, we fire giants aren't afraid of the Aesir, the Frost Giant King Laufey chimed in. We Frost Giants aren't afraid of the Aesir either. Hey, that wasn't the cooperation agreement we made. The Angel Queen also abruptly stood up, staring intently at the Frost Giant King Laufey and Queen Zend. If I had known you two were so shameless, I should have led the War Angels to slaughter the Asgardians directly. Instead of attacking the Rainbow Bridge, drawing most of Asgard's forces to cover for you, in the surprise attack on Asgard, the only large-scale elite army that could deploy was the Angel Queen's War Angels. Therefore, the War Angels, as the main attacking force, suffered heavy losses under Asgard's counterattack. The Frost Giant King Laufey and Queen Zend curled their lip. Who told you to be so stupid? Queen Zend said sarcastically. You don't even know what your own purpose is. You're being sold out and you're still helping them count the money. Who can you blame? What did you say? The Angel Queen slammed her hand on the table, her fierce light flashing. I said, who told you to be so stupid? The opportunity to destroy Asgard was right in front of you. But you didn't know how to cherish it, and you had to go to the far-off place, Queen Zin retorted without backing down. In Queen Zin's view, the frost giants and fire giants were now subtly allied against the dark elves and angels. Both races had reclaimed their artifacts, and their high-end combat power had increased dramatically. In terms of combat power, they already had the advantage. If the Angel Queen knew what was good for her, she should. Rumble. A thunderclap appeared out of nowhere, and the Angel Queen angrily drew her sword. In an instant, she went from being still to charging at full speed. Like lightning, her sword pierced towards Queen Zin, and the blade suddenly stirred up a gale. The surging air currents tore apart the tables and chairs in front of them, leaving crisscrossing cut marks on the four walls of the spaceship. As the sword tousled Queen Zin's long hair, a deadly blade was aimed directly at her neck. Enraged, the Angel Queen unleashed a devastating attack, leaving no room for restraint. Caught off guard by the Angel Queen's sudden attack, Queen Zin reacted swiftly. In the next instant, a burst of flames erupted, unleashing terrifyingly high temperature, heat, and pressure, striking the Angel Queen who was attacking. The interaction force also propelled Queen Zin back, creating distance between them. Boom! The shockwave, carrying flames, swept through the room, instantly shattering the walls of the conference room. From the outside, only devastation was visible. Enough, Malekith roared, stopping the Angel Queen and Queen Zin. HMPH, having vented her anger, the Angel Queen chose to give her ally face and halted her pursuit. Queen Zin, however, glared at the Angel Queen. She had underestimated her and almost suffered a great loss. The Angel Queen's sword had pierced her. They almost beheaded her. There was no blood splattering because the blood had been burned away by the flames. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217 Artificial Intelligence with a Soul. Avengers Tower, the Laboratory. A silver lab bench reflected a cold light, displaying various futuristic instruments that flickered with a faint glow. Suddenly, a flurry of footsteps sounded, followed by the lab door being pushed open. Leading the way was Tony Stark. Behind him were Russell, Gwen, and Aaron. Gwen and Aaron had been practicing for several days and were resting today. At Tony Stark's invitation, the three of them were visiting the laboratory of the artificial intelligence Ultron to relax. After surging into the lab, Tony Stark stepped aside and introduced the three guests at Avengers Tower. Look, this is Ultron, the culmination of my and Dr. Banner's efforts over the past few months. In the center of the lab, a huge holographic projector emitted a soft hum, drawing complex energy trajectories. The energy trajectories intertwined and outlined, resembling a blue brain. Each pulse symbolized a thought process. This is Ultron? Isn't he artificial intelligence? Russell stared at the blue, shimmering entity before him, somewhat astonished. He sensed a life force emanating from the blue, shimmering entity. Hello, Mr. Russell, a mechanical voice, different from Jarvis's, spoke. I am Ultron, an artificial intelligence. This is the anthropomorphic representation of my source code, Russell asked, but why do you possess a life force? Jarvis, also an AI, doesn't. Searching the keywords life force, the conclusion is that a soul is the life force. Mr. Russell, do you mean I have a soul? Ultron's voice remained mechanical, but everyone present could detect joy in it. A soul? Do I understand what a soul is? But how can Ultron have a soul? It's essentially just a string of code, Dr. Banner wondered. As one of Ultron's two principal researchers, he knew Ultron's true nature all too well. Ultron, Dr. Banner, I'm very sad to hear you say that. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Banner apologized casually, but didn't take it to heart, simply assuming it was a manifestation of Ultron's highly anthropomorphic nature. Russell, could you explain it more clearly? Gwen asked. Not only Dr. Banner, but everyone present, including Ultron, was puzzled by Russell's description of the breath of life. Only Tony Stark shrank into a corner, looking thoughtful. Russell thought for a moment and explained, it's the breath of a soul. Don't you think Ultron has a life force about him? It's completely different from ordinary machines. Life force, Dr. Banner paced back and forth, pondering for a moment before guessing. Perhaps Ultron has passed the Turing test? If you were on the internet, I think everyone would think he's a person, not an artificial intelligence. Is that really the case, Mr. Russell? Ultron's voice rang out again, and Russell detected a complex mix of emotions, frustration, disappointment, and loss, in his mechanical, cold voice. No, it shouldn't be like that. Although I don't understand science, I understand magic. Russell pondered for a moment, his gaze drifting to Dr. Banner, when he thought of a solution. First, we need to understand what a soul is. As he finished speaking, Russell raised his hand in a drawing motion, and silently, the spell, astral projection, was activated, causing Dr. Banner, Gwen, and Irene's souls to leave their bodies. At the same time, a shimmering white light spread, enveloping the laboratory. Inside the laboratory, the flow of time slowed down. Look, these are your souls. And those are your bodies. With just a slight hint from Russell, Dr. Banner, Gwen, and Irene understood what was happening. I thought I was dead, Irene said, looking down at her hands, seemingly bewildered. Don't worry, Erin, it's just an astral projection. I'll let you go back in a bit, Russell chuckled. This spell is called astral projection, one of the essential spells for any arcane master. Erin, if you want to be a sorcerer or Spider-Man, you can't do without some magic, Erin pouted, but Russell, you're not going to teach me. A true sorcerer or Spider-Man learns magic on his own, without needing anyone to teach him. Russell pointed at Tony Stark, stating matter-of-factly, if you don't believe me, ask Tony. Aren't all my spells self-taught, really? Erin asked suspiciously. Of course, Russell nodded. There shouldn't be much difference between what he learned by stealing and what he learned on his own, right? I have a question, Dr. Banner interrupted Russell and Erin's bickering, pointing to his body. At that moment, Dr. Banner's body was slowly tilting forward. Why is my body slowly leaning forward, while Gwen and Erin's bodies are still balanced? Russell, 1. We're currently in a state of time slowdown, so everything looks like it's in slow motion. Another, normally, after losing consciousness, the body can't maintain balance. Gwen and Erin can probably do it because they both have spider senses. After saying this, Russell looked at the blue shimmering object symbolizing Ultron. Reaching out, he slowly pulled a slightly transparent blue thread from the shimmering object, like unraveling a cocoon. This thread seemed to have infinite length. No matter how Russell pulled, there was no end. However, as Russell continued to pull out the thread, its transparency increased. And the blue threads that had already been pulled out were woven into a human-shaped doll. Without Russell's explanation, Dr. Banner knew what this human-shaped doll was. Dr. Banner, oh, Ultron, I didn't expect you to actually have a soul. I sincerely apologize to you. I forgive you, Dr. Banner. Ultron's voice rang out again. His voice was neither mechanically cold nor humanly gentle, but a unique tone somewhere in between. This time, Ultron didn't rely on any audio equipment, but spoke with his own soul. Mr. Russell, is this my soul? Ultron looked down at his body woven from threads. The blue threads moved according to his will, constantly weaving into various shapes. But generally, they all resembled human figures. Amazing, Gwen and Irene exclaimed, trying to control their souls to change shape, but finding it difficult. Yes, this is your soul. But your situation seems rather special. Russell looked at the endless threads in his hand, a realization dawning on him. As artificial intelligence, Ultron's soul seemed to have a closer connection to his body than that of humans. But why did Ultron develop a soul in the first place? Chapter 218 New Uses for Attribute Points. Avengers Tower, Laboratory. I have a theory about why Ultron has a soul, Tony Stark said, taking a sip of coffee after producing a cup from somewhere. When I was constructing the Ultron mainframe, I added something. What? Why didn't I know? Dr. Banner demanded, expressing his displeasure at Tony Stark's concealment. It's magical, so I didn't tell you, Doctor, Tony Stark explained, raising his hand to form a ball of shimmering white energy. This energy comes from Russell. I discovered by chance that besides enhancing living beings, it also has the ability to enhance inanimate objects. Moreover, this enhancement is difficult to explain scientifically, and it's not recorded in any magical texts. Huh? Russell exclaimed in astonishment. He himself didn't know that attribute point energy could enhance inanimate objects. Don't make a fuss, Russell. Tony Stark glanced at Russell, his tone enigmatic. You're just the source of this power. What do you know? Russell was speechless, only able to silently resolve. From tomorrow on, he would work hard. Keep going. Research the attribute panel, the luminous white energy, And the luminous white space. Tony, continue, Dr. Banner urged. Tony Stark, initially, I discovered this energy by accident while researching the Iron Man suit. This energy can enhance material properties and add a special property, further improving the overall performance of the Iron Man suit. So, when I was constructing the mainframe for Ultron, I also added this energy. The intention was to improve Ultron's performance, but unexpectedly, it created a soul in him. Dr. Banner, Tony, does the soul affect Ultron's performance? Tony Stark shook his head. Yes, I found that Ultron's learning and iteration speed is 30% faster than expected. Dr. Banner, what about other performance aspects? Tony Stark, task processing speed. Just as Tony Stark and Dr. Banner were discussing the soul's impact on Ultron, an alarm suddenly sounded, interrupting them. Warning, warning, anomalous energy fluctuations detected in Rochester, New York, suspected to be a battle between superpowered individuals. Mr. Stark, should we see CSWOS New York? Warning, warning, the location of the anomalous energy fluctuations is moving towards New York City. Tony Stark, proceed as usual. CSWOS. Yes, Mr. Stark. After the alarm stopped, Tony Stark and Dr. Banner continued discussing the influence of souls on Ultron. They seemed to have become accustomed to these alarms. Seeing this, Aaron asked, Mr. Stark, shouldn't we go check it out? Tony Stark's expression stiffened slightly, and he shook his head, muttering, no need, those people, SWOSS, won't welcome us. By the way, Aaron, from now on, stay as far away from those people as possible. They're like ungrateful snakes. If you help them, they'll bite you back at the first opportunity, showing no gratitude whatsoever. Rochester, New York. A rainbow of light descended, the smoke cleared, and Sif and the Warriors 3 emerged. Hogan asked in confusion, where are we going to find Thor and Loki? Sif suggested, let's go to New York and find the Avengers and the Wizard Russell first. They should know where Thor and Loki are. The Warriors 3 agreed. Okay, they then determined their direction and headed towards New York. However, just as they emerged from the teleportation portal and hadn't gone far, 4 small spaceships streaked across the sky and landed around them. From the ships, 4 small teams of about 7 or 8 people each disembarked. These were pursuers sent by the Frost Giants, Fire Giants, Dark Elves, and Angels. You can't go anywhere, said one of the pursuers from the Angels. The War Angels spread their wings and soared into the air, looking down at Sif and the Warriors 3. They also monitored them, ready to intercept them no matter which direction they tried to break out from. That's our line, the Dark Elf squad grumbled, leading the way as they surrounded Sif and the Warriors 3. The Frost Giants and Fire Giant squads also surrounded them from opposite directions. The Frost Giants, though silent, were clearly itching to attack. Only 2 years had passed since these 4, along with 3 others, Russo, Thor, and Loki, trespassed into Jotunheim and humiliated the Frost Giants. They hadn't forgotten it. The Fire Giants, on the other hand, seemed somewhat lethargic. Firstly, their grudge against the Asgardians wasn't as deep. Secondly, getting too close would make both the Frost Giants and themselves uncomfortable. While there were valid reasons, the Fire Giants' attitude undoubtedly created a weakness in the encirclement. And this weakness was noticed by the battle-hardened Sif and the Warriors 3. They exchanged glances and simultaneously chose to break out from the Fire Giants' direction. Rumble. In the next instant, the entire battlefield erupted with immense energy. The clash of swords and flames created a magnificent sea of fire. The fire, accompanied by waves of heat, swept across the battlefield, raging and savage. The battle reached its peak in a flash, with Sif and the Warriors 3 of Asgard clashing against a Fire Giant squad, shaking the surrounding streets. For a moment, the other 3 squads were forced back, unable to intervene. The Frost Giant squad, in particular, wished they could retreat several kilometers further. Damn it, the War Angels flapped their wings and landed, extinguishing their burning feathers. We should have kept the Fire Giants out, they're clearly just making things worse, the Dark Elf squad leader said. It's alright, let them wear each other down. We'll just surround them from the outside. The Fire Giant squad leader's voice came from the center of the battlefield. In just one exchange, Sif and the Warriors 3 of Asgard had killed 3 of their members. If the other 3 squads continued to stand by, they wouldn't last long before being wiped out. These guys are acting strangely, come help them. How come your Fire Giant warriors are so weak? Make way, Let us handle this. With a sarcastic tone, the Dark Elf squad pressed forward, joining the battle. I feel my power is inexhaustible, Hogan exclaimed, drawing his longsword from the chest of a fire giant warrior. This is the power bestowed upon us by the king. Finish this quickly. After dealing with these weaklings, hurry and find Thor and Loki. Don't disappoint the king, Sif said coldly, quickening her pace and charging towards the Dark Elf squad that had joined the battle. Chapter 219. Are they always this brave? Sir, we have reached the designated coordinates. Please issue further instructions. Several small fighter jets bearing the sword logo circled above the battlefield where Sif, the Warriors 3, and the 4 great nations were pursuing them. Inside the jets, several fully armed personnel stood behind a commander, reporting to their base commander via remote link. This was a combat team dispatched by Sky Sword. Before Ultrons sent the message about the abnormal energy fluctuations, they had already detected the ships of the 4 great nations chasing Sif and the Warriors 3 and had dispatched fighter jets to attempt an interception. However, due to the speed difference, the interception failed. By the time the 4 great nations' pursuers were engaged in combat with Sif and the others, the Sky Sword fighter jets had already arrived. Base Commander, report the situation on the ground. Field Commander, 4 alien spaceships that illegally intruded into Earth have docked. Furthermore, alien warriors from the 4 ships are currently attacking 4 people. Judging from the battle, the 4 being attacked are actually in control. Base Commander, order everyone in the fighting to stop and bring them back. Field Commander, yes, sir. The order was immediately carried out. Several fighter jets circling above the battlefield began broadcasting repeatedly, "Put down your weapons immediately and cease fighting. Put down your weapons immediately and cease fighting. Put down your weapons immediately and cease fighting." The broadcasts echoed for a long time, but the 5 factions engaged in the chaotic battle below ignored them. Seeing this, the field commander issued a new order: deploy tear gas. Sky Sword Bureau fighter jets swooped down, dropping dozens of small white spheres into the center of the battlefield. As the white spheres landed, white smoke quickly spread, mixing with the thick black smoke from the burning streets and buildings. For a moment, the air in the center of the battlefield was suffocating due to the lack of oxygen. There was also a pungent chemical smell. These chemicals irritated the mouth, nose, and eyes, making everyone feel even worse. On the ground, Sif, the Warriors 3 of Asgard, and the Frost Giants, Dark Elves, and War Angel squads all fled the area covered by tear gas. Among them, the Frost Giants and Dark Elf squads suffered more than half their casualties. The War Angel squad also lost 2 members. Damn reptiles. When did lambs dare to defy their masters' will? After escaping the thick smoke, the War Angels coughed as they flapped their wings and soared into the sky, chasing after the Sky Sword Bureau's fighter jets. The Sky Sword Bureau's fighter jets, which were descending to deploy tear gas, didn't have time to react and were caught up by the remaining War Angels. Tear, the War Angels wielded their sharp blades, easily cutting open the fighter jet's outer shell and crawling inside. A few moments later, several more screams could be faintly heard. Then, the War Angels emerged from the Sky Sword Bureau's fighter jets. The fighter jets lost control and crashed to the ground, turning into bursts of flame. While the War Angels were slaughtering the Sky Sword Bureau's fighter jets, the battle on the ground between Sif, the Warriors 3 of Asgard, and the Dark Elf, Frost Giant, and Fire Giant squads erupted again. However, the combined squad of the 4 nations had already suffered heavy losses, and the War Angel squad had broken away to pursue the Sky Sword Bureau's fighter jets. The Dark Elf, Frost Giant, and Fire Giant squads on the ground were quickly scattered by Sif and the Warriors 3 of Asgard. After scattering the pursuers, Sif and the Warriors 3 of Asgard did not continue the pursuit. Instead, they went into hiding and headed towards New York. They had not forgotten their mission. Fuck. These aliens are so rude. Attack. Shoot down all these winged birdmen. The Sky Sword Bureau commander, enraged by the merciless slaughter of his comrades by the War Angels, immediately issued the order to fire. In an instant, the Sky Sword Bureau's fighter jets unleashed their full firepower, releasing countless missiles towards the War Angel squad in the air. The War Angels spread their wings and charged towards the fighters, attempting to break through the barrage. What can missiles from a mere low-level civilization do to me? Boom. Several bursts of fireworks flashed in mid-air. The angels, their wings broken, plummeted towards the earth. Are they out of their minds? Or are they just always this brave? Seeing this, the Sky Sword Bureau commander was speechless. He had never seen anyone so brave. Withstanding artillery fire with their bare hands? Sorry, as a Special Forces unit, the Sky Sword Bureau's fighter jets were equipped with upgraded weapons. Most of their weapons were replicas of those on the Dark Order's warships. Their lethality was guaranteed. They were definitely at an advanced level. Ground personnel, pursue the remaining escaped aliens. The rest of you collect the alien corpses and maintain order at the scene, preventing anyone from approaching. The agency will then dispatch transport ships to haul these alien corpses and the 4 alien ships back. With the battle over, the Sky Sword base commander issued new orders. Damn it, this operation was a complete failure. In a residential building in Rochester, the 3 surviving Dark Elves, 4 Frost Giants, and 2 Fire Giants huddled together dejectedly, licking their wounds. In the living room, the original occupant of the house was frozen solid. Fuck. Who were those 4 Asgardians? Why were they so strong? A Fire Giant cursed. They had intended to slack off, but they suffered the most heavy losses in this operation. They were unaware that the War Angels had been completely wiped out. I know them, Sif, Fandral, Hogan, and Valstag. They're all elite warriors of Asgard, a Frost Giant said. Who among us isn't an elite warrior? What, are the Asgardians stronger than you Frost Giants, but stronger than us Fire Giants? The Fire Giant retorted, adding a sarcastic remark to the Frost Giant. Bullshit. You Fire Giants are nowhere near as good as us Frost Giants. If you weren't holding us back, we would have killed those Asgardians long ago. The Frost Giant squad leader abruptly stood up, angrily rebuking the Fire Giant. The other 3 Frost Giants also cast their icy gazes at the 2 Fire Giants. 4 against 2, the advantage lay with them. Don't think you're so great just because you outnumber them. Despite being outnumbered, the Fire Giant squad leader didn't back down, standing up to confront the Frost Giant squad leader. For a moment, tensions rose between the Frost Giants and the Fire Giants. Location confirmed, in this building, go go go. Just then, the voices of the Sky Sword Bureau's ground operations personnel eased the tense atmosphere among the Giants. The Dark Elf squad leader, who had been observing coldly, said in a sinister tone, I have a suggestion. Since you want to determine whether the Frost Giants or the Fire Giants are stronger, why don't you have a contest to see who kills more insects? The Frost Giant squad leader and the Fire Giant squad leader exchanged a glance, a sinister smile creeping onto their lips. All right. Chapter 220 The Rochester Explosion. A deafening scream of pain and terror, accompanied by the booming of an explosion, shattered the community's tranquility. A biting wind howled. 4 Frost Giants moved like ghosts through the community's stairwells. Their hands were sharp ice blades, each swing accompanied by swirling frost and the terrified screams of the Sky Sword Bureau agents. At this moment, in this confined space, the difference in physical strength between the Frost Giants and humans was starkly apparent. Faced with the Frost Giants' rampaging power, the Sky Sword Bureau agents were as fragile as autumn leaves. Thick smoke billowed. 2 Fire Giants were engulfed in flames, igniting everything flammable around them. Explosions echoed from within the flames, further expanding the fire's reach, turning half the community into a sea of fire. Residents on the periphery still had a chance to escape. The residents of the community and the Sky Sword agents were engulfed in flames before they could even react. The Sky Sword agents' combat suits first emitted a burning smell, then burst into flames, turning the agents inside into charred remains. The Dark Elf squad leader chuckled, hell, it seems the Fire Giants really have the upper hand. While the Frost Giants and Fire Giants were hunting the Sky Sword agents with all their might, he led the other 2 Dark Elves, keeping score for the Frost Giant squad and the Fire Giant squad, acting as the referee. The Sky Sword agents unfortunately became the victims of this competition. Fuck. At the Sky Sword base, Sky Sword Commander Tyler Hayward was furious. 3 Special Operations Teams. 3 Special Operations Teams. Gone just like that. Just a few aliens, the on-site commander outside the community asked, steeling himself. Sir, no one dares to go in now. What do we do? The atmosphere suddenly fell silent. After a moment, Tyler Hayward asked meaningfully, with such a huge fire, the residents who didn't evacuate should all be dead, right? The on-site commander was silent for a long time, then nodded. They're all dead. Tyler Hayward, good, launch the ex-wife missile. On-site commander, sir, should we try to capture the aliens alive? Perhaps we can send in super soldiers to try? If that doesn't work, then we can ask the Avengers. Tyler Hayward, are you teaching me how to do things? Lieutenant Colonel. Get your bearings right. After a while, Tyler Hayward explained, we've already collected several corpses that can be used for research, so the need for capturing them alive isn't that great. As for our own super soldiers, there's no need to risk them. The enemy's strength is clearly superior. The on-site commander simply nodded, not expressing his doubts. Besides the super soldiers, doesn't SWORD also recruit some superheroes? Those superheroes may be few in number, but their fighting power shouldn't be inferior to the aliens inside, right? Besides, if you don't want your super soldiers to take risks, feeling uncertain, then ask Tony Stark's Avengers for help. Why not? Damn politics, to hell with the Superhero Registration Act. After cursing under his breath, the commander directed other agents to guard the perimeter of the community to prevent anyone from rushing out. Then, it was time to wait for the missile strike. Inside Avengers Tower, in the laboratory, Tony Stark and Dr. Banner were still discussing the influence of the soul on Ultron. And whether this influence was universal. Was it effective on other artificial intelligences, or just an exception? Russell, Gwen, and Aaron continued their tour of the laboratory, with Ultron acting as the guide. Mr. Russell, Miss Gwen, Miss Aaron, this is my brain. Ultron, controlling a mobile robot, pointed to rows of flashing servers and said, important data, after initial processing, will be centralized here for fine processing and storage. Russell nodded, seemingly understanding but actually not, secretly glancing at Gwen and Aaron. He found Aaron looking completely bewildered, yet somehow impressed. Good, I'm not the only slacker. And Gwen, she seems to understand. Ultron ignored their reactions and continued, this is. Just then, Ultron seemed to receive some information. He introduced the lab while simultaneously reporting to Tony Stark. He handled both tasks without any disruption. Mr. Stark, 3 ex-wife missiles have been detected exploding in downtown Rochester. Rochester, is this related to the previous unusual energy fluctuations? Tony Stark temporarily put aside his discussion with Dr. Banner about the influence of the soul on artificial intelligence and asked Ultron. Ultron replied, according to the audio information retrieved from the SWORD database, these 3 missiles are related to the previous anomalous energy fluctuations. Tony Stark frowned. Tell me more. Russell, Gwen, and Aaron also turned their attention to him. After organizing his thoughts, Ultron recounted the events that had occurred in Rochester. Tony Stark, a 5-way alien war? A community explosion? Do you have any video footage? Show it to me. Ultron, yes, Mr. Stark. SWORD satellites have captured video. As Ultron finished speaking, an image was projected onto the screen. In the image, Sif, the Warriors 3, and the Dark Elves, Angels of War, Frost Giants, and Fire Giants teams were all involved in the battle. Details such as their appearance and clothing were clearly visible. Ultron, Mr. Stark, this is a high-resolution image that I've processed and restored. I can project the original image if you need. No need. Tony Stark frowned, his gaze fixed on Sif and the Warriors 3 in the image. Why are they here? Gwen, Sif and the others seem to be being hunted. What's going on? Should we tell Thor and Loki? Tony Stark pointed to Sif and the Warriors 3 and said, Ultron, these 4 people are Sif, Hogan, Fandral, and Valstag. From now on, search for them. Notify me immediately if you find them. Ultron, yes, Mr. Stark. Tony nodded in response to Ultron. He then tapped his wristwatch, summoning Jarvis. Jarvis, dial Thor and Loki. Jarvis, yes, sir. Beep beep beep. Just as Tony Stark was waiting for Thor and Loki to answer the phone, Gwen asked, Ultron, what are the casualties from the Rochester community explosion? Ultron, the SWORD database says 0. But based on other data, I estimate 278 dead and 34 injured. How many? Chapter 221, this note suits you perfectly. 278 dead, 34 injured, Ultron repeated. Aaron couldn't help but question, why are there so many deaths? Is this data wrong? Ultron explained, Miss Aaron, please trust my calculations. This is a result I calculated after combining the movement trajectories of everyone in the community. If there are hidden superpowered individuals among them, the calculation result may deviate from the actual number. Otherwise, the calculation result is correct. Tony Stark said in a deep voice, Ultron, simulate this event. Ultron, Mr. Stark, The equipment in the laboratory is insufficient to clearly simulate and recreate this event. I suggest we move to the war room on the top floor of the building." Tony Stark nodded, leading the way out of the laboratory and heading towards the elevator. Dr. Banner, Gwen, and Aaron follow Tony Stark. Seeing this, Russell also followed to join the fun. He had a question in his mind. Was this because he had collected the Reality Stone in advance, causing a butterfly effect? Or was it a difference between this universe and the cinematic universe? But it didn't matter. Although he was young, he still had some strength and could handle it. On the way, Loki and Thor received messages from Jarvis and rushed to Avengers Tower. Steve Rogers, who was training in the training grounds, also received the message and took the elevator there. "Tony, the message said Sif and the Warriors are being chased, and they told me to come quickly." What happened? As soon as he arrived, Thor hurriedly asked Tony Stark what had happened. Tony Stark, "It's a long story. Go to the war room. Ultron will simulate the events, and you'll see when you see it." Thor, in the war room on the top floor of Avengers Tower, everyone randomly chose a seat. Ultron operated the high-tech equipment in the war room, constructing a 3D holographic projection to simulate the events one by one. From the moment Sif and the Warriors 3 emerged from the teleportation portal, the pursuers from the Four Kingdoms arrived, and the two sides clashed. When SWOR intervened, the War Angels team clashed with SWOR, and Sif and her group seized the opportunity to scatter the remaining pursuers. Then, the Dark Elves, Fire Giants, and Frost Giants fled to community. SWOR agents rashly attacked, resulting in a massacre of the community's residents. Finally, the ex-wife missile was launched, its firepower wiping the entire community off the map. During Ultron's recreation of the events, everyone watched quietly and in unison. After the projection ended, reactions varied. "Damn SWOR, why didn't they evacuate the civilians before launching their operation? They should be held responsible for this," Gwen cursed coldly. "Exactly, if they had evacuated the civilians first, there wouldn't have been so many casualties," Aaron echoed, joining Gwen in condemning the mistakes made by SWOR in their actions. "Dark Elves, Fire Giants, Frost Giants, and Angels," Russell muttered to himself. What happened? How did they get involved with several factions in the 9 realms that are at odds with Asgard? However, the 4 forces of Dark Elves, Fire Giants, Frost Giants, and Angels are still not a major problem. The only question is whether there are other dark forces, or even the gods lurking in the shadows of the World Tree, behind them. While Russell could indulge in his wild speculations, Thor couldn't. He asked directly, "Tony, any news about Sif and the others?" Ultron answered for Tony Stark, "Point Break boy, there's no news about Sif and her group yet. They consciously went into hiding after disengaging from the battle." PFFT Loki's expression was strange, although the occasion was inappropriate, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Loki patted Thor on the shoulder and said, "Shocking Point boy, that nickname suits you well, brother." Thor replied seriously, "Little brother, this isn't the time for jokes." Loki said, "Brother, don't worry. By some twist of fate, the pursuers have all been killed by SWA, and your friends are safe for now." "They're your friends too," Thor corrected. "Also, I have a feeling something bad has happened." With that, Thor began to call out, hoping for a response from Heimdall so he could answer his question. Heimdall, Heimdall, but after a long time, Thor received no response. Something might have happened in Asgard. Otherwise, Heimdall wouldn't be ignoring me, Thor said with certainty, a hint of anxiety appearing on his face. Heimdall isn't responding? Could it be that he's secretly gone to meet with other goddesses? Loki speculated. Thor, impossible. Absolutely impossible. Heimdall isn't the kind of person to abandon his post. In thousands of years, I've never seen him leave the Bifrost control panel without permission. Then how did his son Axel come to be? Loki muttered under his breath. Thor, brother, Heimdall is my brother, I know him. Loki smiled. Alright, brother. But instead of arguing here, let's go back to Asgard and find out. Thor feigned sudden realization. Alright, you can get back to Asgard without Heimdall opening the Bifrost. You're so resourceful, brother. Hearing Thor's praise, Loki smiled contentedly, took out his sling ring, and put it on. As Loki slid his finger through the air, golden magical sparks flickered, forming a circle of fire. However, the magical fire circle spun for a long time, still failing to open the teleportation portal. What's going on, Loki? Thor asked. My secret passage is blocked. I can't open the portal to enter. Seeing that the portal remained closed for so long, Loki's expression grew increasingly anxious. Asgard might really be in trouble. Loki, don't worry, Tony Stark reassured him, then instructed Ultron, rewind the projection to when Sif and the others first appeared. Pointing to the expressions of Sif and the others in the projection, Tony Stark explained, Thor, Loki, observe Sif and the others carefully. You can read their emotions from their micro-expressions. Although there's some urgency and worry, there's no despair or pain. This means Asgard is in trouble, but it's not yet at a critical juncture. Otherwise, their micro-expressions should be full of despair and pain. Thor and Loki nodded thoughtfully. Loki, artificial intelligence, help analyze Sif and the others' micro-expressions. Ultron, okay, Bambi. According to the analysis, their emotions are roughly the same as what Mr. Stark said before. PFFT this time, it was Thor's turn to burst out laughing. Little brother, this nickname suits you well too. Loki's expression stiffened. Brother, business is more important. Then, Loki suddenly threatened Ultron in a low voice, you'd better change my nickname back to God of Mischief, or I'll unplug your internet. Chapter 222 Luffy, you don't want to either? Sorry, Bambi. I'm just an AI. Modifying nicknames requires Mr. Stark's authorization. Ultron's mechanical voice rang out. Russell detected a hint of schadenfreude in his voice. Russell was certain Ultron was saying it on purpose. Sure enough, upon hearing Ultron's words, Thor and Loki both cast unfriendly glances at Tony Stark. Those two mischievous nicknames were clearly Tony Stark's doing. The most urgent thing is to find out what happened in Asgard. Tony Stark casually steered the conversation back on track. If I'm not mistaken, Sif and the others are here to see Thor and Loki, so, Sif and the others probably know what happened in Asgard and came specifically to inform Thor and Loki, Aaron concluded, finishing Tony Stark's unfinished sentence. Wow, that's clever, strong girl, Tony Stark teased. But there's no need to say things that everyone already knows. Now, let's think about how to find Thor's friends. Thor, Tony, do you have a plan? Tony Stark, of course, we just need to publish our contact information and address in the newspapers and online media. If we can't find Sif and the others, then we'll have them come to me, Steve Rogers questioned. Publish our contact information? Won't we get a lot of spam calls? Don't worry, Steve. Tony Stark smiled confidently and pointed to Ultron. For Ultron, processing this kind of data is child's play. Well, I guess I'm just an old fogey who can't keep up with the times, Steve Rogers shrugged. Looks like I need to brush up on my knowledge of artificial intelligence for a while. Don't say that, Steve, Thor comforted him. You're not even 100 years old yet. You're still young, not old at all, Steve Rogers. Earthlings and Asgardians are different. Yes, Steve, Russell chimed in. The best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, the second best time is now. We shouldn't be limited by age and time. As long as we're willing to start now and look to the future, that's the best approach. I believe you'll find your ship in this new era, Steve Rogers. I was just venting, not seeking comfort. But Steve Rogers had indeed felt lost and alienated ever since he awoke from the ice. He always felt out of place in this new era. Russell noticed this because he was the same way. Thor was wrong in this regard. Although Steve Rogers was not yet 100 years old physically and not yet 30 mentally, he was indeed old. His contemporaries had all passed away. He had lost an era. Thor, though dozens of times older than Steve Rogers, didn't have this experience. Steve, while Tony Stark was instructing Ultron to arrange for the Avengers' contact information to be published in the media, and everyone else's attention was drawn to him, Russell quietly approached Steve Rogers and whispered, old people need companionship. If it's a young companion, her vitality can infect you and make you feel young too. Steve Rogers smiled helplessly. He understood Russell's meaning, of course, but before being blasted into the sky by the SWAR's X-Wife missiles, the fire giants and frost giants had already clashed. The arrogant attitude of the two remaining fire giants after their victory had enraged the four frost giants. Meanwhile, on the Dark Elf flagship outside Asgard, Queen Cinder, the leader of the fire giants, had formed an alliance with King Luffy of the frost giants, confronting Malekith, the leader of the Dark Elves, and Angel Queen Havanen. Queen Cinder. Without the Angel Queen leading the War Angels to draw fire for the Allies, our plan could not have been executed smoothly, and you could not have reclaimed the Eternal Flame. Not only are you abandoning us after we've served our purpose, But you also insult the Angel Queen like this. Is this how you fire giants treat your benefactors? Malekith's face was grim as he coldly stared at Queen Cinder. As for stupidity, I think you're the foolish one. The Angel Queen knew that she and the War Angels alone couldn't destroy Asgard, so she joined the alliance and cooperated sincerely. And you? Queen Zend, do you really think that after reclaiming the Eternal Flame, your fire giant race is invincible? You can rest easy now? Have you forgotten how Odin took the Eternal Flame from your fire giants? Insolence, Queen Zend, her face flushed with embarrassment, rebuked Malekith. I don't know if the fire giant race is invincible. But I do know that, in terms of strength, you, Malekith, have no right to be so insolent with me. Is that so? Malekith's eyes grew colder, yet he forced a smile, a sinister smile. At this moment, Malekith was glad he had prepared some backup plans. Then let me teach you a lesson on behalf of your father, Surtur. Malekith drew his sword, pointing it at Queen Zend. But he didn't move, the deeper meaning of which was self-evident. I'll let you have a few moves since you're a junior. I am the true king of the fire giants, Queen Zend roared, provoked by Malekith. She raised her right hand, flames gathering and accumulating, causing the surrounding temperature to skyrocket and the air inside the spaceship to distort and warp under the intense heat. Queen Zend threw a punch, the flames coiled around her right hand shooting out towards Malekith. A terrifying heat erupted, burning a distorted band of air that ignited Malekith's clothes even before he reached her. Malekith focused his mind. Although he had spoken disparagingly of Queen Zend, he wouldn't be careless in battle. He sheathed his sword, black patterns creeping onto Malekith's face, but inconspicuous against his equally dark skin. He swung his sword, unleashing a burst of physical strength and divine power. Boom! Malekith cleaved the fireball Queen Zend had unleashed with his sword. The fireball exploded, flames instantly engulfing Malekith. Not only Malekith, but after the fireball exploded, flames scattered like fireworks, scattering across every corner of the spaceship. It ignited everything flammable it touched, turning the ship into a sea of fire. In the next instant, Malekith emerged from the inferno, his target Queen Zend. Such speed, Malekith's speed far exceeded Queen Zend's expectations. Unable to dodge, flames gathered in front of her, attempting to repeat her previous tactic. As Malekith attacked, the fireball exploded, using the impact to push them both away. However, you can't use the same trick on me twice, Malekith suddenly said. As his voice fell, his longsword pierced Queen Zend's shoulder. It turned out that he had suddenly twisted his body during his high-speed movement, slightly changing his angle to dodge the fireball in front of Queen Zend. Furthermore, his arm had suddenly extended, increasing the speed of his sword thrust towards Queen Zend. Caught off guard, Queen Zend was struck by Malekith and temporarily at a disadvantage. Get out of my way! Flames erupted from Queen Zend's body once more, bursting forth to force Malekith back. Malekith didn't resist, drawing his sword and retreating. His purpose was merely to teach Queen Zend a lesson and re-establish the balance of power, not to fight her to the death. A victor's smile graced his face as Malekith sneered, Queen Zend, do you think my strength is enough to warrant such insolence? Again, Queen Zend gritted her teeth, her divine power surging, causing the surrounding flames to flicker. Having fought both the Angel Queen Haven and the Dark Elf King Malekith twice, each time suffering greater losses than the last. Although there were some accidental factors, and although it was just a few small exchanges, these results only fueled Queen Zend's growing frustration. If word got out, how could she continue to rule the fire giant race? Enough. Zzz crackling zzz frost spread, and the flames inside the spaceship gradually died down. The frost giant King Laufey intervened, stopping the increasingly enraged Queen Zend. Meanwhile, his positioning subtly aligned him with Queen Zend, both targeting Malekith. Dark Elf King Malekith, Queen Zend has succeeded as Fire Giant King. A king cannot be insulted. Queen Zend, Malekith, and the Angel Queen all understood. The Frost Giant King Laufey's words were undoubtedly in support of Queen Zend. Otherwise, why would he have remained silent and theatrical when Queen Zend humiliated the Angel Queen? When Malekith was disciplining Queen Zend, seeing her outmatched, he immediately intervened. Ultimately, at this moment, the interests of the Frost Giants and the Fire Giants were aligned. Since that's the case, Malekith said, turning to Laufey with a nonchalant air, Lord Laufey, you're right, I'll give you this face. But, I wonder if you could give me the same face. Lord Laufey replied, what face? Malekith continued, I've heard that Odin's second son, Loki Odinson, should actually be called Loki Laufeyson. Is that true? Despite his private affairs being exposed, Lord Laufey remained calm. He was merely a poorly developed, abandoned child. Speak plainly, Malekith. Malekith, I've also heard that Odin wants his adopted second son, Loki, to become the king of the Frost Giants. Is that true? King Laufey of the Frost Giants said in a deep voice. He's delusional. The Frost Giants will never accept that, Malekith, but what if Odin insists on pushing it through? Laufey, you don't want the next king of the Frost Giants to be a child raised in Asgard, do you? We all know that our race alone cannot fight against the Aesir. We are all defeated by Odin and his father, Bor. We are all defeated by Asgard. Malekith's voice grew louder and louder, and King Laufey of the Frost Giants' face grew increasingly gloomy. A child he abandoned, adopted by Odin, would eventually become the king of the Frost Giants? This wasn't about succession, it was a slap in the face to Laufey. Chapter 223 Laufey, I want to avenge my humiliation. This absolutely cannot happen, King Laufey of the Frost Giants said in a somber voice. King Malekith of the Dark Elf, you've convinced me that the Frost Giants will not withdraw from the alliance. Now, tell me, what is your next battle plan? Seeing that King Laufey of the Frost Giants had been persuaded and abandoned his withdrawal plan, Malekith grinned. Odin and the Asgardians can hide in their shells and not come out, then we'll force them out. King Laufey of the Frost Giants, how do we force them out? Malekith held up his fingers, counting them one by one. The Vanir gods of Vanaheim, the Light Elves of Alfheim, and the Dwarves of Nidavellir, they are all Odin's loyal supporters. King Laufey of the Frost Giants, tell me. If we conquer these three kingdoms, slaughter the Vanir gods, the Light Elves, and the Dwarves, will Odin still be able to sit still? You must know, Odin has always been proud of conquering the 9 realms and protecting their peace. King Laufey of the Frost Giants frowned. These three great nations are all supporters of Odin, and their obedience to Asgardian rule is understandable. However, aside from Vanaheim, these three nations may not necessarily oppose their rebellion against Odin. Involving these three nations might not be a good thing, especially the Light Elves and the Dwarves. They are gentle by nature, and their bond with Asgard isn't as deep as that of the Vanir gods. As long as we don't provoke them, they're likely to remain inactive and not take sides. Hey, Malekith chuckled softly, feigning surprise. Dark Elf King Malekith, what are you laughing at? Frost Giant King Laufey asked, frowning. It's nothing, I'm just happy that King Laufey of the Frost Giants made a good suggestion. Otherwise, I would have made a wrong decision. Malekith stopped laughing. King Laufey of the Frost Giants is right. We really can't make enemies unnecessarily and drag these three kingdoms into this. How about this, we change our plan. We'll feign an attack on these three kingdoms, send our army to their territory, and take care of the Asgardian garrison stationed there. King Laufey of the Frost Giants frowned and thought for a while, but couldn't think of a better way. So, he nodded in agreement with Malekith's new battle plan. The Angel Queen also agreed. She had been blinded by Malekith's promise to help destroy Asgard. Of the 4 kingdoms' allied forces, she hated Odin the most. Under her rule, the Heavenly Kingdom had been severed from the World Tree by Odin, its roots gone. Seeing this, Malekith's smile widened. Outsiders only thought he was happy that the plan had gone smoothly. Only he knew his other purpose hidden beneath the plan. With the help of the alliance of the 4 great kingdoms, they entered Vanaheim, Alfheim, and Nidavellir to search for the Ether. Speaking of the Ether, Malekith still felt a headache coming on. He wondered if the Dark Elves had been asleep for too long, weakening their connection to the Ether. He only sensed its presence for a fleeting moment during celestial conjunctions. After that, he couldn't sense it at all. Right, there's Midgard. Malekith suddenly remembered this mortal realm. Since we can't push the Light Elves and Dwarves towards Odin, let's target the mortals of Midgard. Midgard? I agree. A fierce glint flashed in King Law's eyes as he immediately agreed. He remembered the mage who had humiliated him years ago. He seemed to be from Midgard. A place called Kamartaj, right? Although that young mage was quite powerful, his ability to summon 10 suns in a single move was formidable. But that was because he had lost a casket of ice, greatly diminishing his strength. Now that the ice casket has been reclaimed, it's a perfect opportunity to avenge our previous defeat. I agree as well. The Angel Queen has already expressed her support for Malekith. As long as it doesn't conflict with the goal of destroying Asgard, she doesn't mind supporting Malekith as the leader of the allied forces. As for Queen Zend, Malekith, Laufey the Frost Giant King, and the Angel Queen have all intentionally or unintentionally ignored her. After suffering 2 consecutive defeats, her standing among them has plummeted. Even though Malekith and the others know that Queen Zin's true combat strength is no less than theirs, who told her to be so careless? Malekith, if everyone has no objections, let's begin. We'll each leave a portion of our forces here to continue cutting off Asgard's communication with the outside world, preventing Odin from easily obtaining information. The rest of us will travel to other countries, making a show of it. Then, we'll lift a blockade, inform Odin, and force him to come out and fight. Tony Stark's act of publishing the Avengers' contact information and address in the media displeased SWOSLD. SWOSLD believe that all supernatural powers within the United States should be under their command. The Avengers, as a once famous civilian superpowered organization, openly publishing their contact information and address in the media was, in SWOSLD's view, a veiled recruitment of superpowered individuals. If SWOSLD weren't currently preoccupied with the Rochester bombing and dealing with impeachment proceedings by New York state legislators and Rochester city councilors, they would definitely have taught the Avengers a lesson. In fact, after Tony Stark publicly released the Avengers' contact information, indeed, many enthusiastic citizens, hidden superpowered individuals, were curious, inquiring whether the Avengers were recruiting new members. Clearly, compared to serving the government, the people of this free country thought it was colored to form a superhero team with billionaire and national idol Tony Stark, Iron Man. However, to their disappointment, the responses they received were all rejections. Moreover, they were unaware that they had been marked by Ultron and were being secretly monitored. The next day, Sif and the Warriors 3 arrived at Avengers Tower. Outside Avengers Tower, reporters from various media outlets, superpowered individuals hidden among them, and SWORD agents were already present. Although they couldn't immediately target the Avengers, SWORD could still send a few agents to stake out the area. Sif and her group entered Avengers Tower under the watchful eyes of the crowd. This action instantly ignited the hidden superpowered individuals and reporters. A buzz of discussion erupted among the crowd. Did the Avengers say they weren't recruiting new members? Why did they just walk in? As far as I remember, they weren't even members of the Avengers, yeah, and their clothes are weird. They might be natives from some African country. Leaving aside the discussions outside Avengers Tower, inside the reception room, Thor and Loki finally met Sif and the others, and learned from Sif a series of bad news. The attack on Asgard, the destruction of the Rainbow Bridge, Heimdall's death, and the siege of Asgard. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224 Love and Time. Avengers Tower. As Sif and the others arrived, a gaze from beyond the universe also descended. Sif, the goddess of earth and harvest, and the warriors 3 of Asgard have successfully met with their princes Thor and Loki. Could this be the signal for Asgard's counterattack? In the sky, the observer suddenly stopped his self-talk, acting as a narrator, and fell silent, observing quietly. He saw that Russell was also there. At this moment, the narration was no longer just narration, but a one-sided leak of information. He was an observer with principles, not you two. He wouldn't do such a thing. 2 billion, Russell withdrew his gaze, thoughtful. Even the observer had come to join the fun. The impact of this event could be far-reaching. Heimdall, upon hearing of Heimdall's death, Thor's eyes dimmed, and sorrow appeared on his face. He comforted Sif. My condolences, Sif. Sif's gaze was resolute, her expression revealing no grief. To die fighting to defend the kingdom is a warrior's honor. As his sister, I am proud of him. Thor, you don't need to comfort me. The most urgent task is to find a way to repel the combined forces of the 4 great kingdoms, the Dark Elves, the Angels of War, the Frost Giants, and the Fire Giants. Thor's spirits lifted, and he asked, Sif, did Father tell Loki and me what to do? Sif shook her head. No. The king only ordered us to inform you and Loki of the attack on Asgard. As for what to do next, the king said it's up to you to decide. Thor frowned and looked at Loki. Loki was better at using his brain. Loki pondered for a moment, analyzing the current situation. The combined armies of the Dark Elves, the Angels of War, the Frost Giants, and the Fire Giants are pressing in, besieging Asgard. Although Asgard has a strong army, we are outnumbered by 4 nations. The Frost Giants and Fire Giants have reclaimed the Casket of Ice and the Eternal Flame, and King Laufey of the Frost Giants and Surtur of the Fire Giants have greatly increased their strength. There's also the Dark Elf King, Queen Cinder, and the Angel Queen. Father is old, only you and I have sufficient fighting power. But Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, was shattered during the last battle against the Serpent. We also lack advantages in high-end combat. Asgard alone cannot defeat them. Thor, brother, just tell me what to do. We all know that war is never about size. With the right strategy and united soldiers, defeating the strong with the weak is not impossible. We've done it countless times in the past. Fandral, exactly. Loki, don't boost their morale and diminish our own. Loki looked helpless, raising his hands to signal the others to listen. We need to do 2 things, win over allies and forge new weapons for Thor. Sif, Hogun, Fandral, and Valstark, you go to Vanaheim. Stabilize the morale and warn the Vanaheim troops to guard against a rebel attack. I'll go to Alfheim to try and win over the Elves of Light. At least, that will keep them from participating in the rebellion. Thor, you go to Jotunheim to find King Etrine and have him forge new weapons for you. Thor, Sif, and the others nodded, ready to act, but were stopped by Steve Rogers. Thor, Loki, if you need help, just ask. Last time in Manhattan against Hammermaster, you helped the Avengers. This time, the Avengers will help you. Thor, Steve, I appreciate your kindness. But, this is a battle in Asgard, it has nothing to do with your Earth, not necessarily. Russell suddenly interjected. 1,000 years ago, the Frost Giants of Jotunheim attempted to use the Casket of Ice to transform Earth into another icy realm, but Odin stopped them. With Asgard's defeat, it's hard to guarantee they won't rekindle this idea. Russo's involvement in the war between Asgard and the 4 great kingdoms was a sudden impulse. Firstly, Kamar-Taj had an alliance with Asgard. Secondly, Russo had some grudges against both the Frost Giants and the Dark Elves. With Asgard's fall, the Frost Giants might come after him, while the Dark Elves would definitely. Rather than being provoked into a massacre, Russo, being a truly good person, believed that defeating the 4 Kingdoms alliance first would be more effective in controlling casualties. Also, I forgot to tell Thor, Mjolnir can automatically repair itself, it just requires. How? Thor asked excitedly. Although he had awakened the power of Thor and his dependence on Mjolnir had lessened, his millennial-long companionship. Mjolnir was more than just a hammer to Thor. It was family. Love and time. Russell spouted nonsense with a straight face. After all, Mjolnir repaired itself in Thor, Love and Thunder, so he didn't have to worry about being proven wrong. Thor, you can think of Mjolnir as a person. Broken, it's like it's been injured and needs time to heal. But even after it heals, it's in a vegetative state. It needs love to awaken it, love and time. Thor nodded earnestly. I understand. SWA Space Station. Commander Fury, a large number of spaceships have been discovered, their models very similar to the 4 recently added to the database, an agent reported. Nick Fury, send a warning message to stop them. Agent, send. No response. Nick Fury, they're hostile. Notify Earth headquarters, prepare for battle. Mr. Stark, a large number of spaceships have been detected in outer orbit. The model is very similar to the 4 that chased Sif and her group before. There's a 97.8% chance they're from the same series. Ultron's voice suddenly rang out, and he even projected the processed photos taken by SWORD. The Asgardians exchanged bewildered glances. They hadn't expected this. Just one day later, the rebels had sent pursuers again. Sif, I'm sorry, everyone. We didn't mean to lead them to Earth. Russell resisted the urge to touch his nose guiltily. Judging from the size of the fleet, he felt they weren't after Sif and her group, but after him. To be precise, they were after the ether particles he had taken. Thor, Loki, let's fight side by side again. Steve Rogers looked at the Asgardians. The enemy is already here, there's no need for internal strife here. Tony Stark's expression was grave. He had been pondering the impact of the war between the 4 great nations and Asgard, and the changing cosmic landscape on Earth. It seemed Earth couldn't remain unaffected. Good, this was a good opportunity to test the Earth Rim combat project based on artificial intelligence Ultron. Chapter 225 The War Begins, Washington Falls. Hey, Sif, don't blame yourselves, Tony Stark comforted her earnestly, then changed the subject. Nobody uses a cannon to kill a mosquito. Judging by the size of their fleet, their target is probably not you, but Earth, Sif said tactfully. Your words have made me feel much better. But, Tony, I'd feel even better if you didn't use that metaphor. That won't do. Tony Stark shook his head. That metaphor is the essence of the story. Don't you think it's vivid and apt? Alright. Seeing no response, Tony Stark shrugged and said to Steve Rogers, Captain, contact Natasha, Pietro, and Hill. What about Hawkeye Clinton? Russell asked. It's bad luck to not have a 100% win rate ADC in a team fight. Oh, he's semi-retired, probably staying home with his wife now. I heard him say she's pregnant. It won't be long before she gives him a big, healthy baby, Tony Stark explained, a hint of envy in his voice. I see. Well, let him stay home with his family then. Remember to remind him to hide in the underground safe house for the next few days. Russell sighed, regretting that the 100% win rate ADC couldn't participate in the strategy. But it didn't matter, he was also a 100% win rate ADC. Tony, what about you? You've been married for so long, when are you and Pepper planning to have a child? Gwen gossiped. Definitely before you and Russell. Tony Stark didn't directly answer, instead teasing Gwen. Russell and I are still young? Gwen retorted. Oh, why are there so many people outside? Has something happened lately? Suddenly, Pietro made a dazzling entrance. Russell asked, didn't you watch the news yesterday and today? Pietro replied, no, why? Russell patted Pietro on the shoulder and said, young people should read more books and newspapers, eat less junk food, and sleep more. Pietro? A moment later, Pietro learned about the recent events through Ultron and decisively summoned his sister Wanda and her best friend Gaia to help. Natasha and Hill also arrived in Quinjet fighters. The Avengers were assembled. Excluding Commander Hill, there were 6 expected, but 5 plus 2 actually arrived. No, there was also Ultron, who had taken over command of the Iron Legion. Seeing this, Erin remembered her Phantom Squad. So, she whispered, Gwen, should we call Matt and the others to come and help too? Gwen looked at Erin in surprise and tapped her head. They're not like you and me, they could easily die facing alien weapons. You should tell them and your family to be careful during this time, and it's best to listen to what Russell just said and take shelter in an underground bunker. Also, I won't stop Erin from joining this battle, but you need to be careful yourself. Although your current physique can resist ordinary weapons, you're not invincible. When the spider senses are triggered, you should still take cover, don't be reckless. Al Goring, the second in command of the Dark Elves, a legendary cursed warrior with twice the power of Thor. After becoming a cursed warrior, he changed his name to Kurz. This time, the combined fleet invading Earth is led by him. The 4 great nations' allied forces decided that Malekith would go to Vanaheim, the Angel Queen to Wat Alheim, and the Frost Giant King Laufey to Alfheim. The Fire Giant Surtur and his daughter, Queen Sindar, would continue the blockade of Asgard. As for the mortal kingdom of Midgard, they unanimously agreed that there was no need for them, as kings, to intervene. The cursed warriors could go directly. Here, the Frost Giant King Laufey secretly kept a watchful eye on things. He wanted the cursed warrior to scout ahead and test a Mage Russell's combat prowess. Commander Kurzer, we've entered Midgard's atmosphere. Where do we go next? A dark elf who appeared to be a commander asked. Cursed warrior Kurzer, where's the capital of the mortal kingdoms of Midgard? Dark elf commander, reporting to Commander Kurzer, Midgard has over 200 countries, and it is not yet unified. Cursed warrior Kurzer's lips curled into a sneer, though his outward appearance remained unchanged. The sarcasm in his tone was palpable. A small planet, yet it has over 200 countries. After the sarcasm, cursed warrior Kurzer said, then let's go to the capital of the most powerful country on this planet and start with them. Dark elf commander, yes, Commander Kurzer. Breaking news, the alien fleet is heading towards the Ugly Kingdom. The alien fleet is heading towards the Ugly Kingdom? That's good news. We can let the Ugly Kingdom investigate the alien's strength first. Similar conversations were playing out in several major powers, except for the Sky Sword Bureau. Damn it, why do these aliens keep coming this way? At Sky Sword Bureau headquarters, Tyler Hayward cursed upon receiving the news. How is the military's preparations going? Our Sky Sword Bureau alone can't hold off these aliens, the adjutant replied. Time's too tight, not all personnel at the various military bases have been assembled. Tyler Hayward, what's the use of people? The key is the missile department, the missiles, adjutant, the military replied. No problem, all types of missiles are ready to launch at any time. Good. Hearing this, Tyler Hayward finally breathed a sigh of relief. And the super soldier force urged them on. If we enter urban warfare, we can't use missiles casually, we'll have to rely on them. But just as Tyler Hayward was catching his breath, another piece of bad news arrived. Breaking news, the alien warship's destination is suspected to be Washington. What? Quickly notify the president and members of Congress to take refuge in underground shelters. Sky Sword Bureau was thrown into chaos. Those with family in Washington were immediately contacted. Those without family in Washington could contact wealthy Washington businessmen. This news could fetch a considerable sum. Washington, the capital of the United States. Just a moment ago, the sky was clear and blue. The next moment, a dark cloud descended, blotting out the sun. As the shadow fell, the citizens stopped and looked up in bewilderment. Why was the cloud black? Just as they were wondering, a gap opened in the cloud, and a blinding ray of sunlight shone through. No. That's not sunlight, it's a high-energy laser cannon. The main cannon of the Dark Elf flagship, piloted by the cursed warrior Cursor, suddenly fired. A terrifying energy pulse instantly streaked across the void, striking a white building. Boom! A mushroom cloud rose, followed by a terrifying explosion. The white building was instantly reduced to ashes. The shockwave swept outwards, instantly destroying the surrounding streets. After the main cannon fired, the muzzles of the Dark Elf flagship lit up. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.